to go. You're right on time. This is right on time.
All right.
The
I
mic
think it's
is
just
Tom.
a guide
Tom.
for us
The
with
mic's
the zoning
on.
ordinances.
Good.
But I think it was a great
I
idea,
hear that.
but when we did this 20 years ago,
Well, the planning
results been
department's not
entirely
here.
different.
We're
And
waiting for
I think what we
Ben and
envisioned.
Welcome to the March 12th, 2024 City of Troy Planning Commission. If you are here for a Board of Review meeting, you should go to the assessing. This is not where those are taking place tonight. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission.
State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives of the city's planning department, city's attorney office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman and Associates.
If you wish to address the Planning Commission, please come forward to the lectern when recognized and clearly print your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission and not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt the meeting, please either switch it to silent mode or turn it off. At this time, I ask the Planning Commission Recording Secretary Kathy Zarnicki to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Buechner?
Here.
Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Fox?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Ms. Malalali?
Here.
Ms. Parakis?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Quorum present.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Savadant.
Yes, thank you. I sent an email to the Planning Commission explaining this issue yesterday, and it's kind of convoluted, but hopefully I can make sense of it. So this is the property, item 5.
6.
Item 6, excuse me. There, you can see that better. So item 5 is for an industrial building, and item 6 is for a street vacation on the same property. And if you look at this, this is the property, the subject property that the industrial building's on. This here is a alleyway. It's a 20-foot wide alleyway, and this aerial photograph is from our GIS system, Geographic Information System, that we use to display information, and it's maintained and updated by Oakland County. So every time there's a lot split or rezoning change, we make changes to this. So when we had pre-application meetings with the developer for this application, we referenced that there was an alleyway that was going to have to be vacated. It was approved in, I think, 1920 or something, but never built. But it's there. It's a city right-of-way, and it's designated and approved to be an alleyway. The applicant does not own it. It's city property. It needs to be vacated. So we processed the application, we scheduled the public hearing, et cetera, and then they did a title research, and discovered that it had actually been vacated in 1994, so 30 years ago. So there's still easements there that need to be vacated, but that's totally a different story than vacating a right-of-way. So we did verify that that is incorrect, and we've sent information to the county to fix that information so we don't make the same mistake in the future. But in the meantime, there's a public hearing scheduled for a street vacation. We don't have to have the public hearing. It's already been vacated 30 years ago. So I can answer any questions you have. So the long and the short of it is, we don't need the public hearing. The applicant submitted a letter, formal email requesting removal of this item. So with that, Madam Chair, we'd like to eliminate item 6 from the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Savidan about that? Would anyone like to make a motion? Mr. Lambert?
I would move that we approve the written agenda with the removal of item 6 from that agenda.
Okay, do we have a second? Mr. Fox? I think we're ready for,
Okay. Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Biegner?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, great. We are moving on to the approval of the minutes from February 13th, 2024. Would anyone like to make a motion? Ms. Malala-Holly? And anyone second? Mr. Fox? Is there any discussion? All right, I guess we're ready for a vote.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Biegner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to the commission on something that is not already on the agenda? Okay. Seeing no one coming up, we'll move on to item 5, which is a preliminary site plan approval, JPLN 2024-0001, proposed Livernois Elmwood Business Park, northeast corner of Livernois and Elmwood, PIN 88-20-34-153-041 and 042 and 043, Section 34, zoned IB, which is Integrated Industrial and Business Zoning District. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Carlisle.
Yes, thank you. If you give us 1 minute, Director Savidan went to upload the presentation. It wasn't pre-uploaded, so.
Okay, sure.
A good consultant takes the blame for things like this. It's actually my fault. My wife will tell you I can't multitask. This is proof. It's top.
All right, thank you. Tonight before us is a proposed site plan application. The site is located at the northeast corner of Elmwood in Livernois. The applicant has submitted a plan to develop a light industrial, what they're determining as flex space at the corner of this intersection. The site is currently undeveloped. You can see from the aerial, it's grass with a few trees on it. It's approximately 3.3 acres in area, and the site is zoned IB, Integrated Industrial and Business District. As the Planning Commission is aware, the IB district is our industrial zoning district in the city. It allows for a wide range of uses, and I'll get into that discussion here in a second. The arrangement is shown above. Those 4 boxes are the 4 proposed buildings. They are total approximately 45,000 square feet of flex space. Each building contains between 7 and 8 units, or suites each, and each suite is approximately 58 by 26 feet in size. The intended uses, as proposed by the applicant, include a mix of retail, studios, warehousing, and light industrial/manufacturing. We do note that the buildings meet all the setback requirements, and parking is in compliance based upon a discussion of the uses based for what the applicant is proposing. With regards to uses, as I noted, the IB permits a number of special and permitted uses. This range from everything from multifamily, restaurant, retail, to light industrial, warehousing, and laboratories. The applicant has not provided any detailed information about what the proposed uses that they are proposing. However, their parking is based on light industrial zoning use. In discussions, though, with the applicant, they did note that they would like to market this to a varied mix of uses, including retail, studio, warehousing, and light industrial. We note that a discussion on uses is important, one, to confirm if parking is sufficient, and I'll go into more depth about that in a second. But secondly is to mitigate impacts on adjacent properties. Again, this is across the street from Clausen, which has residential properties, as well as the south, which has office properties. So issues of noise, odor, aesthetics, et cetera, should be consideration as part of the application. Again, we do note that we wish the applicant would clarify their intended uses. With regards to parking, parking, as I noted, is based on light industrial uses. From a parking standpoint and zoning ordinance standpoint, it's a very low parking supply based on square footage. Based on the number of suites, the applicant is averaging only 2.9 spaces per suite. Conversely, other permitted uses in the IB district require a significant more amount of parking based on square footage. For example, a general retail requires 1 space for 250. So for their average size suite, this would require 6 spaces rather than the 3 that are provided on the plans. A studio use requires more parking per square footage and would require 8 spaces. So based on the number of uses in the mix, without a better indication of what the proposed use mix for this area is going to be, there will probably be a parking problem in the future, especially if you get a number of studio uses or retail uses in there and they're not offset with low parking intense uses. So we really do need better clarification from the applicant of what the uses are to confirm that the parking is sufficient. With regards to traffic and circulation, there are 2 points of access to the site. One is off Livernois, one is off Elmwood. The engineering and the fire department have reviewed the access and find them to be sufficient. However, we do note that we recommend that along Livernois, they increase the sidewalk to 8 feet, as well as provide a sidewalk along Elmwood as well. The landscape plan complies except for one significant item. They are required to provide internal landscape islands. They have provided 3 landscape islands that have multiple trees. That's not how we calculate and measure the amount of landscaping internal. The intent is not to clump trees in one landscape island, but rather spread them out throughout the site. So we are requiring that the applicant provide 6 additional tree lots within the parking area. We do note that the project right now is an entire green grass space and is largely or totally pervious right now. So for that reason, we do encourage them to incorporate additional site features designed to minimize adverse impacts on the environment. This include rain garden, bioswale, rain barrels, timing on lights, or any other ideas that the Planning Commission may suggest for the applicant to move this project forward. We do note the applicant has proposed a Welcome to Troy, or City of Troy welcomes you sign at the southwest corner. The details of the sign, what it's going to actually say, what it's going to look like, materials have not been worked out, but we do note on the site plan itself, they do show a dedicated easement area for a future Welcome to Troy sign. Proposed elevations are included in front of you. These are, the elevations are a maximum of 22 feet in height. They include what you typically assume with a light industrial flex space. It's primarily metal panels with some detailing of stone still and metal canopies to provide some architectural relief. The materials appear to be a shades of gray and black. This is elevation. The top one is looking at Livernois. The bottom one is looking at Elmwood. As the Planning Commission is aware, there are 3 standards the Planning Commission should use to consider site plans: ensure compatibility, incorporate best architectural practices, and enhance the character, environment, and safety for pedestrians and motorists. So overall, we do support the site and do support the development and find that flex space is a desired and wanted use in the city. However, we do note that there are some significant items that the Planning Commission should discuss with the applicant. This includes the proposed uses of the suites, if any additional architectural details are needed, and if the site plan standards have been met. If the Planning Commission does approve this preliminary site plan, we do note 5 items that should be addressed as part of conditions of approval. Thank you.
All right, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Carlisle? Yep, Mr. Hudson?
Mr. Stevenon, you indicated that depending on the use, parking may be well sufficient, or it might be pretty tough depending on the use. What power, if any, do we have in the site plan of putting restrictions on either the use or the number of parking spots?
So we have, the zoning ordinance contains parking standards based on use. So let's look at it, let's look at this a little bit differently. Let's say this is a vacant building, and it was vacant, it was abandoned, and an applicant came and wanted to repurpose the building into something. One of the first things we want to do is make sure it's going to park. So with an industrial parking space standard of 1 per 500, that would be appropriate if it were to be used for an industrial use. But if they were proposed to use it for something that was going to generate more parking, like a large restaurant facility or indoor commercial recreation facility, for example, that had higher parking standards, then that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate. So the same logic applies here. They use the 1 per 500 square foot requirement, but some of the uses that could be in those spaces could have a significantly higher requirement, and we have the authority under zoning to apply those standards.
I'm not sure you answered my question. If we've got one proposed tonight with 3 parking spots and one with a much larger amount, if we were to approve the site plan and there was some second thinking about it, and the applicant wanted to amend that site plan or to remove it for a higher use which would require more parking, what do we do?
How we treat this for multi-tenant shopping centers, for example, is they have to get a zoning verification for every new tenant that moves into a space.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
So what we do for multi-tenant shopping centers, for example, is for every tenant that moves in, they do a zoning verification to count the number of parking spaces for that particular use. But if there is not enough parking, then that particular user does not get zoning verification, cannot move into that tenant space. Now we have a lot. One second, Mr. Hudson. We have a lot more leeway with the parking in a shopping center because they're much larger facilities. There's usually an overflow. There's wiggle room in there with parking to allow for a variety of uses. How the applicant tonight has proposed this site is he has allocated the number of suites based on the lowest parking requirement per square foot in the zoning ordinance. So basically, to meet zoning, every single one of these suites would have to be a light industrial use. That is not what I hear, what the intent of what the applicant had explained to us what they want to do. So there is no flexibility in parking that if all the suites but one were even light industrial, and there was one suite that was going to be something different, we could not approve that one suite because it would exceed the parking requirement in the zoning ordinance for the site. So that's why we would like a discussion between you and the applicant to confirm what the uses are, and that will likely require changes to the site plan, including maybe not building the number of suites they want, maybe eliminating a building, maybe land bank parking. There's ways to deal with this, but without a further discussion between the Planning Commission and the applicant, we can't tell you that parking is sufficient or not. We don't think it's going to be sufficient based on what their intention of the site is going to be.
Okay, I still don't think you've really answered my question, and that is, Based on the number of uses allowed in the IB district, without a better clarification of uses, there's likely to be a parking issue on site. And above that, a studio use would require 8 spaces for a 1,500 suite. My point is, maybe the intent's good, but maybe they change their mind halfway through this and want to do studios for those 4 buildings. And it looks like the parking is really going to be difficult if they did that. My question is, anticipating that it's a possibility, just a possibility, not saying their intent is false, but what protection or, forget the word protection. How do we know that ultimately it might turn out requiring 8 spaces for every 1,500-foot suite instead of 3, of which they've indicated would be needed?
They would submit a zoning verification for that tenant. We would count the parking, and we would deny the zoning verification because they don't have enough parking. Then they'd have to come back to the planning commission. If they want to do it, they'd have to come back to the planning commission and seek an amendment to the site plan. We've recognized this is going to be a problem, and we're trying to get out in front of it
Okay.
prior to it becoming a problem.
So let's assume the worst. Let's assume they want to do exactly what the maximum allowable parking would be allowed in this project. They say they're going to use one with 3, but it turns out they've changed their mind and they want to have 8 parking spots for a studio. Nothing we can do about that, is there?
We already answered. Try it.
Well, what we could do is present this item to the planning commission this evening, have a conversation with the applicant, find out exactly what their plans are for the different spaces, for the range of uses, and we could condition approval. That's one thing potential thing we could do. Condition approval. Let's say, for example, after our discussion, one of the applicants comes up and says, all we want to do is, in each one of these spaces is industrial. We don't want to do anything other than industrial. Well, that standard for industrial parking would be appropriate. But if they indicate this evening that, well, we want to have full flexibility, we want every use permitted by right in IB is permissible in our development, they could theoretically have a Pilates studio in every one of those 30 spaces, and there'd be parking on Elmwood Road in order for people, their customers to park. We don't want that. We want them to park on site.
I agree. And I am not disintegrating their intent to do this, but we're all human. Events change, and it may come back to trying to squeeze too much in that the parking allows.
Yeah, and I don't think for a second that they have any ill intent here, but properties change hands. And they may manage this property incredibly well, and then they sell it for whatever reason, and it falls, Snidely Whiplash buys the property, and it gets really creative with the uses. Now we have a parking issue. So our opportunity to get it right and to place controls on this application is tonight through the
I
planning
agree.
commission.
All right, if I may, let me first find out if any of the other planning commissioners have questions for the planning department. Then we're going to let the applicant come up. And I think once we hear from the applicant, then we can open the discussion and talk about this parking issue.
If I may, Madam Chairman, just one comment.
Sure.
Nothing we can do about it.
All right.
Okay, open it up.
Yeah, Mr. Faison.
Well, so my question or point was going to be a follow-up to that. I thought you said there was something we could do about it. Like, I thought if it got approved as industrial space and then a studio wanted to sign a lease, it would come before us, or before...
So every change in use in the city is supposed to get a zoning verification. To
Right,
say,
okay.
this space is allowed by zoning, there's sufficient parking and whatever else is required. So in theory, every time they have a new tenant come into one of these studios, they would get a zoning verification, and if there's not enough parking, we would not approve the zoning verification. We anticipate, based on the mix of uses they're proposing, that zoning verifications for a lot of uses are going to be very difficult to obtain, and so we're trying to get ahead of it tonight. That's the whole point of discussion. So we are through the zoning verification is how we would regulate parking, but based on the uses proposed in the suite and the number of spaces, we already anticipate there's going to be a parking problem.
I understand, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, Mr. Lambert.
Yeah, Mr. Carlisle, one quick question for you is the last slide you had up there, you had 5 conditions or 5 elements that had to be included in a resolution, but your report you gave to us had 10. Is there a few that have been knocked off of there other than?
Yeah, today we got a number of items that were resubmitted today that met some of those other items that were on our list.
Okay.
So we can knock those off, and when we go through the resolution, we can tell you which ones were submitted.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? I have one quick question. If you could, you had talked about the 6 islands with the trees, and I was just curious, we talked about how 3 of the islands had trees and they were bunched, or maybe you said we had to add 6 trees, I forget. But I guess my question is, do they have enough islands already to just move the trees around, or are they going to need to put more islands in and lose parking that's already?
I don't believe they have enough islands. I think they had to put 6 more trees in, including spacing those ones that have 2 in their islands already. So I think they're going to lose probably at least 6 more parking spaces.
They're going to lose 6 more spots, maybe?
Is my guess, yes.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Tagle.
Thank you. Just a clarification. Zoning verification, is that triggered when the potential tenant or the landlord submits for a building permit to modify the space? Does the building department then notify the planning department and say, this is what they're proposing, and then planning looks in the records to see if it's verified or not verified? That might help the process. There is a process in place.
Yeah, that's one way it happens. Another way is the broker, the leasing agent reaches out because they want to get ahead of it, and they contact us, or a broker contacts us, or a potential tenant contacts us.
So there are a couple triggers that
Yes.
would involve that
Yes.
verification review.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any questions, or should we bring the applicant up? All right. If you could just sign in.
Okay, sorry, excuse me. Roger Share Development, 31300 Ocean Road from Michigan, representing SBC Ventures LLC for the record. We're proposing a multi-tenant flex space industrial development at this corner on Elmwood and Livernois. We have some more photos this evening.
For showing different perspectives on the building. Is my mic on?
Yeah, it's on now.
Okay, I'm sorry. We have some additional photos and some additional information this evening to present, but I haven't been before this Planning Commission in the past. I'd like to just provide a little bit of a brief background on who we are, our company, Share Development. We're a real estate company based in Farmington Hills, Michigan. We are involved in multifamily development. We're involved in home building. We have a project we're going to start soon in Clawson. We are involved in commercial development. We are based in Farmington Hills. We've been active primarily in Southeast Michigan, in Southern California. We've had projects in Utah, Hawaii, as well as Miami. Our background has not always been in real estate. You may be pleased to know our background is in the nursery business, in selling trees, shrubs, seasonal flowers. My father founded Frank's Nursery, a company in the past, Frank's Nursery and Crafts, which was sold in the 80s a while ago. We sold nursery goods, merchandise during the spring and summer months, craft merchandise all year round, and Christmas trees, Christmas ornaments during the holiday season. I think during its day, we sold more Christmas lights. Of course, we didn't have e-commerce at the time. We sold more Christmas lights than I think any other retailer in the country. So it was a fun business to grow up under. Tonight, we're seeking site plan approval for a moderate-sized industrial development, not something that's so new to Troy even, but a moderate-sized industrial development providing flex industrial space to smaller tenants who have moderate space needs, not always served by larger industrial buildings. Many smaller businesses, they don't need, when it comes to industrial, they don't need 10,000 square feet, 20, 50, 100,000 square feet. They want smaller spaces with leases that are more flexible. We're perfectly targeting this demographic customer. We have spaces that start at 1,500 square feet, and our leases are one-year leases. They can be 3 or 5 year. Most of the larger buildings, if they are subdivided, if landlords are willing to subdivide space, they want longer-term leases, and tenant build-outs are very expensive. That cost needs to be passed on. The multi-tenant flex development today is a very strong part of the real estate market. And some of the other, I'd just like to share with you just a couple of the other brief factors that make this market so important, so desirable. We have smaller office floor plan ratios. Obviously, office today, in general, is experiencing very high vacancy, people working at home. These smaller tenant spaces, too, don't demand big office build-outs, and our small office floor plan ratio is what these small tenants desire. We have direct entry, so the tenants don't have the expense of common area maintenance, common hallways, common lobbies, common restroom areas. They only maintain their own space, which keeps the cost down. We have lower cost for tenant turnover. As one tenant moves out, your cost of re-tenanting the space can be very minimal. You're sweeping the floors, vacuuming offices, and it's otherwise very simple. In apartments, we have to recarpet, we can repaint. Sometimes we're putting in new cabinets and countertops. Much more expensive, much more time-consuming. In these smaller industrial developments, the cost of tenant turnover is not only less, but it's much quicker. And finally, these are single-story buildings, which means we can combine space and allow tenants to grow within the development. Our spaces start at 1,500 square feet. Combining two spaces can take tenants up to 3,000 or 4,500 square feet, which we're going to address parking a little bit more. But the way the parking lot is striped, it's 3 spaces per tenant, but we're assuming there's 30 tenants there. Well, if we don't really think we're going to have 30 tenants. In fact, we're not going to subdivide the buildings for 30 tenants. We think we're going to have 20 tenants or fewer, which means that some of the cross-hatched areas in our parking lot, which are cross-hatched because they may be sitting in front of two tenant spaces, they will become a parking spot for the tenant that occupies those 2 neighboring spaces. So, again, I'm going to have two colleagues of mine show you some of the additional photos we have for the project and also answer some of the questions raised in the review letter. But I do want to emphasize that 2 things. One is we're building an industrial product. It's very desirable. It's an incubator for small businesses. It creates jobs. There's bigger developments these tenants can move on into if they need the space, whether it be physical space, parking space, et cetera. To that extent, it polices itself. If I have a symphony orchestra looking to rent space for practice sessions, sure, these industrial buildings, an overhead door, maybe a big floor plate that they can work within, but I don't think the conductor is going to look at this as a practice area when they don't have that kind of parking. To that extent, it somewhat polices itself. In addition to what Mr. Carlisle mentioned, the tenant needs to go to the building department and get a permit to occupy the space. That's what I'd like to say for now about parking. And then the last thing, it seems that with e-commerce, I think everything is overparked. We know that office buildings are. They're half vacant, and now we're seeing outlets developed in every office building to create more activity, more congestion. Troy has a downtown corridor now they're developing with outlets showing up in front of office buildings. We have shopping centers we know are overparked from earlier ratios where e-commerce has taken over and people just aren't showing up at the shopping centers. Industrial is no different. A lot of the truck traffic into these buildings will come in the morning and then leave because servicemen will come in, pick up their orders, pick up what product they need. Maybe it's an air conditioning unit, maybe it's a cabinet, maybe it's a plumbing fixture, and they'll take it off and do service calls all day. They're not even need. Most of the parking lot in this type of facility, because again, these aren't new, there are many flex space industrial projects. They're just not new and they aren't subdivided like we are, but the parking lots are empty. In fact, you find dumpsters, while we've hidden ours nicely in a masonry surrounding, many times we see the dumpsters sitting in the middle of the parking lot. They're just, the parking spaces aren't used. So that's what I'll say for now. Let me invite Mitchell and Rick. You want to step up? Maybe. And can they display our...
Yeah, I just ask that you sign in and then introduce yourself.
My name is Mitchell Scher. I'm also with Share Development. And yeah, I just thought I'd come off and start out with the obvious. We will not be having retail tenants here. I think there was a little bit of miscommunication at the beginning. And this is highly focused towards industrial tenants that would fit within your industrial IB zoning, which I believe allows research and development, warehousing, and any light industrial manufacturing. The way our parking also was designed, it was not, it was not fully based on your ordinance. We had a lot of talks with leasing brokers and professionals leasing out spaces like this that are overparked, underparked, as well as other developers, not so much doing this in Michigan, but in other states that we've taken a lot of inspiration from that have done this successfully. And our 2.93 parking spaces per unit or 1.95 spaces per 1,000 square feet, we believe is truly perfect for this use. Again, tailored towards flex industrial. Some areas are, would allow for retail. We will not be focusing on that, nor would it be allowable when they are getting their zoning verification and there's not enough parking spots. They will not be allowed, if that helps address any concerns there.
Could you repeat? You said something about retail there. What did you just say?
We will not be having retail, industrial focused.
Okay.
Just to make sure. But besides that, if it helps, I know there were 5 points. I also wanted to address some of those. The sidewalk issue, we will expand off of Livernois, that sidewalk to 8 feet. And off of Elmwood, the only reason we didn't put that was it wouldn't go to anywhere. It would just dead end, and there's full walkability on the south side of the street. If for some reason in the future, maybe through an SAD or other ordinance, there was a way to extend the sidewalk all the way through, we'd be more than happy to participate in that. And feel free to interrupt me too if there's any questions. As far as the tree count, that we had done by our engineer, who unfortunately cannot be here today, but we thought we met the requirement of 11 parking lot trees, which included 2, 1. If we're looking at the islands, there's 2 and then 1. The next one island is empty because there's a fire hydrant and we couldn't fit it. Then there's 2, 1, and 2, which got to 8, as well as 2 on the front entrance corners and 1 on the far east end. So that was how we got our requirement of 11 trees. We were required 27 trees surrounding the development. We have 27. And we also decided to enhance the landscaping too by, I don't know if we have a good picture of the front, but we have shrubs throughout the back of our detention wall, which I think also looks nice, as well as fencing, as well as oriental seasonal plants throughout the property, as well as surrounding the Welcome to Troy entrance sign, which we added. As far as, I think, sustainability, we're going to have exterior lights on timers. We're incorporating low-flow bathrooms. We have a lighter color metal roof, which I believe creates an energy savings through a heat island effect. Yeah, okay. Our architect Rick could maybe talk a little bit more about that, but we looked into incorporating bioswale or rain gardens, which are infiltration systems for the water. However, this is a heavy clay site, so our professionals advised us the water really wouldn't infiltrate and it'd create no positive effect, pretty much either draining right off or killing the landscaping. But besides that, I think if there were any other architectural questions, Rick would be happy to answer of how we came up with the designs for the building.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to go first and then we'll take questions?
It's up to you. I'm really here to
Does
talk
anyone
about
have a
building stuff.
a pressing question for Mr. Scher? Either of the Mr. Schers, or should we go ahead and finish?
Okay. Rick Koenig, Siegel Tumala Associates Architects. As Mitchell and Roger said, we're industrial warehousing, flex space. Our vision for this was to embrace a sleek contemporary aesthetic with the use of pre-finished metal panels, the stone accents around the building, metal canopies to help enhance and indicate where entrances are for the project and tenant spaces. We'll have glass entrance doors, side lights at each tenant space. The overhead doors are insulated metal panel with a glazing across the top panel, which will allow for some indirect daylighting, kind of creating a clear story space in there to help hopefully reduce some used lighting and power through the day to minimize some of that. We are intending to have a highly insulated building to help again with sustainability and energy use. So we're planning to go over and above the current energy code requirements for the walls and roofs on this building. As Mitchell had said, we are looking at a lighter roof to help energy efficiency, with reflecting heat, absorption, minimizing the heat island effect around, and hopefully getting a longevity of the metal roof due to less thermal stress on the project. So I know Mitchell went through some of your items. I know there was some questions about the dumpster. I think that was already, was that part of what you took off earlier? Or we were looking at a integral color masonry screen wall around the dumpster with metal panel gates, kind of to tie in with the rest of the building. There was a comment about mechanical equipment screens, which I think you're referring to the transformers we have on site. So those will be screened. We'll either, depending on where they are, we'll either landscape them or we'll do some kind of opaque fence around them, depending on space. And the site lighting, there was a comment about some foot candles on the north end property line and east end property line, which, yes, my consultant missed that, so we will adjust the shielding and whatnot to get those down to the 1 foot candle that's required there. So I think that covers it quickly enough. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. So.
Does anyone have any questions? Yep, Mr. Buechner.
There's obviously a big question about the use, and I don't know which one of you I heard industrial, but it says retail and another option. Are you willing to get rid of those two words?
So,
Studio and retail?
yeah, we will.
We can get rid of those? I don't want to try to change your program, but.
Yeah, we will not be offering studio or retail space. I guess retail was, maybe a little bit subjective, and there could be, like we've seen some nonprofit tenants, retail type places but they just use this as studio and just warehousing, not studios or retail. This is industrial space. This is an industrial park.
Does anyone else have questions? Yep, Mr. Tagle.
If a tenant moved in and maybe they're a potter, or they make jewelry, or they do iron sculptures, and they wanted to sell their goods in the front portion of their store, would that be considered retail, or would that be considered industrial?
I'm not exactly sure based on the zoning ordinance. They'd have to get that, I believe it was called the zoning verification document. So the city would need to approve if it was retail. It's really not meant, nor would, any retailer really want to go here. There's not high visibility for them.
No, they're not a retailer at their base business. They're an entrepreneur that's making a product.
Yeah, this would be where they could manufacture it, but no, it wouldn't be a retail center for them to sell it. Maybe if there was some sort of wholesaling it where there wasn't incoming, a lot of outside pedestrian traffic.
Let me just ask staff, what would you consider that?
Well, without seeing it, it's hard to answer your question, but we would look at it in such a way as if the principal use, let's say we have a potter, it's a 1,500 square foot space, and 1,400 square feet is used for the pottery wheel and ancillary,
Well, it'll be a little more than 100 square feet to put product out.
I'm using extreme answers to try to answer the question. If the retail sales are clearly accessory and ancillary to the main use, I suppose we could make a finding that it's industrial, but I'd have to see the business plan and kind of get a feel for what they're planning to do.
Okay, all right. May I continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Are these spaces going to be air conditioned?
The warehouses will not be air conditioned.
Okay, so there'll be no rooftop equipment?
There will be no rooftop equipment, no.
All right, okay. And then the last question, on your site plan, you've indicated, and someone mentioned there's striped areas that could be converted into parking spaces.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what's the rationale for the striped spaces. I understand you need striped spaces alongside a barrier-free spot, but the other spots, they don't look like it's wide enough for 2-car spaces. So I guess I'm not sure if I understand the spacing and what the dimension of those are.
Those striped spaces are roughly 12 foot wide, and they are centered on the overhead doors. So it leaves an access to get to those overhead doors if cars are parked there. So if a said tenant has 3 bays of that, they have technically 3 overhead doors. They're not going to be using 3 overhead doors. So those other 2 spaces striped off could become extra parking spots. So, yes.
Okay, but you're only going to gain 1 space per 12-foot increment.
Yeah, but if we restripe it, I could probably pick up a few extra. But yes, if we take out one of those striped areas, you're only going to pick up
12 feet isn't enough, is it?
That's
9.5 foot.
per
Nine
space?
and a half foot for a parking.
9.5 feet.
Yeah.
For standard space, if it was a barrier-free
Yeah,
space?
because we've already got the barrier-free already accounted for, so those aren't going to change.
Yeah, I understand that, but you
location.
still need an aisle next to the
And we do.
8-foot wide barrier.
And we do.
5 foot.
We have a couple of van spaces. Actually, I think, yeah, they're all van spaces. So they're all 8 foot by 8 with an 8-foot aisle next to it, so.
Just the last comment, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
You know, when I look at the renderings, primarily not the internal facade, but more the external, the Livernois and the Elmwood side, there's no fenestration. And it just seems, you know, it seems like there could be a little bit of lightening, in a sense of visual lightening those elevations, maybe with some clear story. You mentioned clear story windows.
Well, we got the stone accent. We do have spandrel glass windows down that elevation. We do have canopies sticking off that side that will have some night lighting in them to help, enhance that at night down that facade.
Well, I'm looking at the Elmwood perspective, and maybe the trees are blocking, there's a couple of...
If you look at that one right there, the Elmwood, so you can see there's, very up close, there's 3 windows in that first set of stone, and it's continued. The next one has 2, the next one down has 3, so there is some articulation going down that elevation.
I'm not disagreeing with you because I see the windows, but I'm just saying I look at that elevation, it seems a rather stark, metal box. And it just to kind of, enlighten it or enhance it a little bit, I think, maybe a little bit more.
I guess that's why, we have a whole bunch of landscaping running down there. But, shrubs are going to grow. They're not going to stay that couple of feet high that I'm showing them right now.
All right.
But yes,
I also, would like to add, this was also, I don't know if we have our massing study in here, but there were no, I believe, any architectural requirements here. So we, this could have been like an all-metal building, just 50 feet high on the side. I don't even know if there was windows.
And just to go back, the stone we're looking at does have some articulation to it as well. So you're going to get a lot of shadow lines running down there as well. So it's not just a smooth face all the way down. So.
Just want to make a clarification to your consideration about getting approval here tonight. Architecture image is a huge thing. It may not be, written out that you need so much fenestration or you need this or you need that, but the way the building looks is a big issue here as far as the design and how it appears in the community.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we tried to really make these a cool looking building with the, because they really could just function all metal. That stone on it is just a facade. We have upgraded metal paneled overhead, glass paneled overhead doors. It's also hard to tell, but there's glass in front, a glass window in front of each unit, as well as an all glass swing door to entry. We're trying to attract, I'd call it maybe the higher end of the industrial flex tenants that are, small businesses, but not just a standard, maybe plain warehouse that they could lease.
Thank you.
Thank you. And while we're talking about the architecture, I just wanted to ask about windows. We use the word windows, but I don't actually think that they're glass windows. Had you considered maybe doing windows along the top, along the ceiling, so not so you could see in, but so you could let natural light in?
It wasn't brought up, but it's always an option to, we could add some more light, glazing up that high. But it just depends on the tenant space and their use. They might not want it there. They might end up with storage racks going up there, and then it's useless at that point. So.
Yeah, okay.
So.
Maybe doing one of the buildings with some or throwing it in there in a certain way. I think windows would go a long way, but that's just my personal. Yeah, Mr. Fox.
So just to comment on the point with the non-compliance with the inner parking lot trees. So you guys got to add about 6 trees from what I can see, and I would be very much interested in seeing y'all do that. My thought is with stripe parking, have you thought about converting that, or at least using that in your math in terms of creating islands, and thus you still remain compliant in parking by using the stripe spaces?
Well, if we eliminate those stripe spaces, then if cars are parked there or you have a landscape island there, you lose access to the overhead doors. So that's the reason the striping are there in the first place. So that's, our, as Mitchell was saying, his understanding was, we can use surrounding the parking lot as the count for trees. So.
Yeah, Mr. Lambert.
First, a compliment. I like the welcome to Troy sign. That area of between Clausen and Troy is kind of confusing to people. Am I in Clausen or I'm in Troy? So that'll be a nice feature to add there. Secondly, I think you are suggesting a second sign. Do you know what the other sign is going to be? Is maybe just to advertise the tenants in the site, or?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there would be a monument sign over by the entrance drive off from Livernois, but yeah, at this time we don't know what that's going to be or how big, depending on tenant usage. So.
And then a suggestion. I know that you said that a bioswale or a rain garden wouldn't work in a clay soil, but there are rain gardens and bioswales. In many areas where there's clay, you just change the soil for that to work better. So especially if you're not going to put a sidewalk along Elmwood, that might be a good area for some kind of a bioswale or a rain garden.
Yeah, I can, I'm sorry, our engineer isn't here to talk about that. I definitely will be happy to bring that up to him. It also may have been a slight issue with contamination, because this is a site we'd be looking for Brownsfield for, to help clean up. So I think maybe that could have been some issue with it. Not quite sure, but I can get an answer back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Malala.
I don't believe I got an answer for the 6 deficient trees. Are we not doing that at all then? You're not going to include any more trees?
I guess it's a question and answer of whether or not that's allowed to use the surrounding parking. No, then we'll have to have more trees. So.
When we do our basic count of trees, we count the trees that are interior to a parking lot, so literally interior to a parking lot. The Planning Commission has the authority to grant approval of trees that are on the periphery to count towards the interior, but the direction that the Planning Commission is going recently is because of heat island effect, softening, stormwater management, that we would like to see the trees within the parking lot location. So we did not count these. I think Mr. Scher indicated they counted these 2 trees. We did not count those 2 trees towards our.
And then we have another one at the far end over there.
This one? Yeah, I guess we didn't count that one either. We only counted the trees that are within the parking lot towards the parking lot requirement. Now, if the Planning Commission is comfortable with counting trees on the perimeter, we can certainly do that, but our understanding and our direction was to count trees simply that are in the parking lot itself. And again, we've got clumpies of trees. We don't count that as 2 separate trees as towards the tree island requirement. They have to be on separate islands to count that requirement.
So what do you think? Can we soften this industrial look a little bit? Is there room for some trees?
Most definitely around the periphery, yes. We can add lots of trees down the east side and a few more down the west side.
No, we're still looking inside the parking.
Inside the parking lot's a little tight, so.
So this is an IB district development. I'm not denying that, but that doesn't mean that tenants won't like some green outside to look out, and also for the people who are driving past, even though they're not using the location, but who doesn't enjoy some more green to look out and be part of, and the changing colors of the trees and all that happens in Michigan. I highly encourage you to look into where you can get some.
If I can respond briefly to that comment, we participated in 2 study sessions, pre-app study sessions with the planning department and prior to this meeting. And we originally planned this building to be the 2 buildings together, where the aisle, the drive, was on the perimeter of the property and the overhead doors faced outward. Mr. Carlisle suggested that we bring the overhead doors facing inward because he was concerned that the exposure of the interior along Elmwood wouldn't be sightly. So we actually had more parking when the buildings were pushed together with the perimeter aisle. Fire department liked it more as well, but we went with this design. I kind of like this more. I think it looks cooler. And we tried to soften the perimeter with additional landscaping with trees. We don't have the view of the overhead doors now. I think Mr. Carlisle was right. This is a prettier way from an exterior perspective to look at it. And I wish we had our other pictures up, because we have some nighttime pictures, we have some more daytime photos, and they give you better perspective along Elmwood, et cetera. But these buildings have a lot of undulation to them. We would love to satisfy the tree count by putting more trees along Elmwood where we have room. Putting more trees into additional islands, it jeopardizes what you're very concerned about, which is the parking issue. So it's like fiscal policy fighting monetary policy. It doesn't seem to make sense. But at the same time, architecture is critical. The way a building looks makes you feel good. Sometimes you're in a restaurant, you don't even know why you like it there. It just feels good. The space feels good. And so architecture is critical. We could have built square masonry buildings. We could have built big steel fold-up buildings, but we have a lot of activity on these exteriors, and if we could take the tree count, and again, it's 6 trees, I don't want to minimize it, 6 trees, 1 tree is a lot, but if we could take that and have Planning Commission discretion to either count the perimeter trees around the immediately around the parking lot toward our 6 additional tree count, or take those 6 additional trees and add them along Elmwood where the primary concern was, I think we'll have a beautiful project that will be very much appreciated by the traffic along Elmwood, the traffic along Livernois, and one that the community can be proud of.
Thank you. Yep, Mr. Buechner.
Did you guys have a chance to reach out to the neighbors and see what their thoughts are on the design?
We knew that this was going to be coming in front of the city, so we thought maybe perhaps the best way. This wasn't really a controversial project, we didn't think, and so we did not do that. Normally we would, but we didn't see controversy here. It was ordinance compliant. We knew we weren't going to have big traffic. On our massing study, which we have, we could have had a 50-foot building built to the corner with big rigs. The big industrial rigs, and it would have been ordinance compliant, but we didn't do that kind of thing. It's a small business flex industrial distribution / warehousing product that's not going to be a retail product. It's the manufacturer that sells some jewelry in front of the store or in the unit. Most retail today is distributing directly to people's homes. It's not even using the retail stores that were designed to be retail. So I think this is going to be more suited for non-retail activity than retail activity.
Thank you. I'm just going to really quickly say that, and the attorney Ms. Dufresne can correct me if I'm wrong, but we did open the doors in the back because I think that by law we're required to have, it's an open meeting.
Yeah, this is an open meeting.
And the doors have to stay open, so just if you're wondering why they are open again. Okay.
Yeah,
You got a question?
Yeah. First of all, yes, I like your design. I like your choice of materials. I see some samples that you brought. I like the sign that you're putting up. I like the materials for the sign. The overall effect is pleasing. The only thing is, when we start making judgment calls on when you required 11 trees and we only have room for 6, I believe it's 6. Is that what we're talking about here? There's 6 islands there, 6 green space islands, so we could have 6 trees, but they need 11?
Correct.
Okay. So we got to find space for 5 more trees. Now, if we say, well, because overall, it's a terrific design. We're going to let that slide. My issue always is when the next guy comes up here and they're going to say, well, you let that one slide for half the tree requirement. Now I want half the tree requirement. And the next guy and the next guy. And it's just, it balloons into a situation. We have to be consistent in our call.
Right.
So that said, I would say, yes, we definitely need the required amount of trees in the parking areas. And it's up to you to design your buildings and your parking to accommodate that. You've done a fabulous job. I have architecturally, I've seen typical other small warehouse type for individual tenant type things in other areas, not in Troy necessarily. And this is a good example of one. As opposed to others I've seen. But I don't want to compare something that looks like crap to this looks great, But it does look great. It stands by itself alone as a really beautiful looking development. But my issue always is where do we bend the rules? And it comes back to haunt us. It bites us in the butt every time. I just don't want to start something here that leads to because Troy's going to be always developing. It's not like, we're fully developed, yes, but we redevelop. Yeah. So that said, I'd like to see you come back. May have to take out one or two of those tenant spaces and allow for, to make sure we at least meet the requirements of our ordinance for parking and trees in a lot. We want Troy to have a different look compared to other cities, and that different look is, it looks great. It looks phenomenal. And this is almost there. You're looking at 5 trees, and maybe, okay, you lose a tenant here or there. And I know you want to maximize your dirt, for profit, but we still have to keep the high standards that Troy provides in all its new development. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, let me simply say that the ordinance is itself one that evolves over time. It can change. Maybe next time the tree count goes down. But you're not disfollowing the ordinance because you look at the spirit and intent of the ordinance. The intent, as the ordinance indicates, is to have a landscaped, a nice-looking product, and I think, as you indicate, we're meeting that objective. It's a nice-looking project. It's It's probably one of the more attractively landscaped industrial projects. Many times we see interior parking lot trees in these projects pulled because the salt hits them. They're not maintained. The landlord doesn't want to take care of it. I know if I put a tree along Elmwood, it's going to be there in 10 years, and it's going to grow, and if it's a flowering crab, it's going to flower every day along that path. If I put it in the parking lot, can't promise it's going to be there, and I don't know, is there an ordinance officer running around Troy saying, this tree died, replace it? And is that happening?
Well, yes, we do. We're very conscious about our environment here.
Well, as you know, we are too from our background, but I don't know that, adding the 6 interior trees to the parking lot, and it's not even 6 because we do have 8 right now. It's really a question of whether we count the 3 perimeter trees, which evidently the Planning Commission has discretion on. If this was really a pivotal issue between it's a good project or a bad project, I'd rather have you vote it down because of some other reason than saying, well, it's a perfect project, but you're missing 3 trees. I think we so follow the spirit and intent of this ordinance that perfection shouldn't be the goal. It should be, are you producing a great project here, serving the community in something more attractive than what could be here with a bunch of industrial rigs? Masco owned this property. We were fortunate to have it, and we would love to do multifamily here, but there's a deed restriction. We cannot do residential here. So this is what we have, and in the classification of industrial, I hope you're able to see more good than bad in this in terms of an approval tonight.
Mr. Faison?
Yeah, I had two questions for staff. The first is, and I agree with Tom and I mean, Mr. Krent, Ms. Malala.
Tom's good.
The trees in the parking lot are better. But I seem to recall that we have approved variances for that parking lot tree requirement. Is that correct?
I wouldn't call them variances, I would say relief. The Planning
Okay.
Commission has granted relief in the past.
So that was one clarifying question. And then the second one, we have a couple of situations, or I guess 3 situations, where there's 2 trees in an island. I think you referred to that as clumping. And I'm not familiar with that, so we don't approve. Okay.
The goal, so this requirement, one parking lot island tree per 8 spaces, it's not an arbitrary concept that we just pulled out of the air. So what it does is, these parking lot island trees accomplish a number of things. One, they make the site look better. Right. They help to calm traffic down, so if there's no island trees, it can be the Indianapolis 500 inside this complex. And finally, and most importantly, it reduces the heat island effect. The heat island effect it's real. Asphalt and impervious surfaces heats up during the day and heats the environment. And it's there for a reason. Now, in the past, I think the Planning Commission has been, going back a few years, the Planning Commission has been more receptive to granting relief. But the heat island effect is more impactful today than it was 5 years ago. We have an application pending right now. We don't have a date yet to go in front of the Planning Commission, but we had an applicant who clumped. I love that word. Is that your word? Clumped. Who clumped 6 trees in an island. Does that meet the spirit of the ordinance? Clumping 6 trees in an island?
It doesn't seem
Doesn't seem
those
like it.
trees would be able to survive.
Doesn't seem like it. So,
Right.
I mean, also for some uses, for example, for residential, we don't, in some zoning districts, we don't have density caps, but we do have the requirement for 1 landscape island tree per 8 spaces. And when developers get flexibility to put those outside the parking area, they get more parking spaces. When they get more parking spaces, they get more units. So it's also tied to density when we're talking about residential uses. So I think it's important as a planner and someone who's concerned. I've got children and one day maybe grandchildren. I'm concerned about the environment. I think it's important. But the Planning Commission, by resolution, can grant relief to this standard.
Understood, and I think it's important too. I was just trying to balance the trees with the design, because I prefer the design with the buildings push out and the parking in the interior versus the alternative. But thanks for clarifying.
Does anyone else have any questions? I'm going to go with Mr. Fox.
One question for staff. So let's say we hypothetically approve this with the condition of trees being added to the satisfaction of the planning department. And in that process of trying to balance that all out, the developer cuts a unit. Would that be a severe enough change that it would end up back in front of us as another site plan, or is that the type of thing that would just go through administratively?
That's the purview of the Planning Commission, whether you have the confidence in the Planning Department being able to review and approve the revisions administratively.
Okay. Well, and I guess I want to say the reason I'm asking is because I also, I really love this idea. I love the parking lot on the inside. I love the buildings pushed out to the edge. I love the trees. I love the concept of getting new types of businesses in the area. But for me, getting the trees in there is also an important aspect. So if we can ultimately save these guys another trip back in front of us where they have to go through and do the whole presentation because in all of their math they ended up having to cut 1 space, that may be helpful to grant that type of leeway to the planning department to sort of relieve that requirement of circling back around to us.
Okay, we'll keep doing questions, but if we don't have any questions for the applicant, I'm going to go ahead and let him sit down. If the questions are more in the nature of a discussion or for our planning department, I don't know. You had your hand up.
Did.
Do you want to ask the applicant?
I do.
Perfect. All right, Mr. Tagle.
Your welcome to Troy sign, is that just a gesture on your part for the project? And if it is, that's great, I appreciate that. But I know at one point, the city was talking about some connectivity between different access points in the city as far as what do the signs look like, what are the materials they used, and did you have any discussion with anybody at the city as far as the design of this particular sign?
No, we didn't. It wasn't a requirement.
Understand
We
that.
knew we were entering the city. We've done, in the past, welcome to signs in other communities, and frankly, I've seen literally plywood signs sitting on 2x4s as all too often, and we don't do that. We like limestone inserts, we like masonry, our dumpsters are masonry, they're not rickety-rackety fencing. We build beautifully, and the welcome sign is intended to be a very durable material and very special. Now, if it needs to coordinate with other signage in the community, we welcome input on that. It's not fixed.
Okay, so you'd be willing to talk
Absolutely.
to the city? Okay.
Absolutely.
Who would they talk to? I mean, I don't even know if the city is still having discussions about that, but I know at one point there were discussions about the main inroads to the city and have some, connectivity between the various.
If this were to be granted preliminary site plan approval, I'd set up a meeting with the appropriate people. I don't know who those would be right now.
Well, I would suggest that,
Sure.
it's great, but let's at least ask the question as far as the design of what's on the city's mind.
All right, I'll ask a couple of questions before you sit down, actually. Okay, so at first when I saw this, first of all, visually I like it a lot. I do think that windows at the top would go a long way, at least in some of your units. But I do like the modern, sleek look. I like the colors and the stonework. I also was skeptical at the beginning about the parking, but it sounds to me like you have it's sort of two-pronged, that you're going to combine units and maybe use those driveways to park, along with the tenants basically that you're seeking aren't really going to need a lot of parking. So you've done your research and you feel like you're parked appropriately, and I'm willing to go with that because we do have a checks and balance with the zoning requirement to make sure your tenants are compliant. But it doesn't change the fact that I'm worried about the trees in the parking lot, and I'm also worried about where snow is going to go when it snows and you're plowing, and you lose parking spots almost always, unless you have a great place for the snow to go. So I do think it's a little bit tight. So I looked a little bit about the setbacks, and you're pretty pushed out with the exception of the west side. But if you were to, even make your units a little bit narrower. One thought I had is when you're entering, instead of doing those islands, what about, I don't know how big the strip would have to be, but what about because you're only parking a single car in the middle, it's not back to back, it's just one car. If you were to add a strip, an island, one long island along the whole thing, I don't know how many feet it would have to be, like 4 or 5 feet, and put trees along there, it would add a lot of trees. You'd probably exceed the tree requirement, and it would bring green in there. People driving by, looking in, would see trees. So I feel like if you take a little step back and maybe think about ways to do it, I think it can be done, because I believe that the message from the Planning Commission is that the trees are pretty important to us, and you'd also pick up some parking spots doing that as well.
Well, if you're asking about extending a lengthier island in the center core area, the way the parking is designed in that center area, it's distributed along the frontage of those buildings, so it's really intended to serve the buildings closest to each center spot. In terms of snow removal, well, it's good to know, I should mention, we have a snow removal contractor immediately to our east. That's our neighboring tenant. So I would let him figure out how to do the snow here. But in terms of street trees and parking, whether we eliminate a unit. If, again, we've been in front of the planning staff 2 times already. If they had the discretion to view our placement of trees with contingent approval based on planning staff's review of parking and tree count, that would be really appreciated, because I think we can, one way or another, achieve the additional tree count within the interior of the parking lot. I think visually, this is not going to look like an unlandscaped development for cars driving. Elmwood traffic doesn't have a view into the interior. Livernois traffic is 40-mile-an-hour traffic. If they're looking in the interior, they're looking the wrong way. They should be driving their cars. It's enough with cell phones when they're driving. But this is not going to look like an unlandscaped area from any perspective. And I do worry about the salt killing things, and then you have an unlandscaped island, and 2 trees per island. These are over 20-foot islands. I hardly describe as a clump. And then 2 of the islands have only 1 tree. So we can buy dwarf trees. We can buy trees not intended to grow and blossom with as wide of a foliage. Then keeping things dwarf-sized would preclude any kind of problem with 2 trees per island here.
Okay. And then the last question I have for you is the hours of operation. What would they be? Would you set them, or would people be able to go and use their warehouse space at any time?
Gosh, I don't know if there's an ordinance requirement for that. They would have to obviously comply with the ordinance requirements. I don't know if I would impose usually in retail, we require the stores to be open. But in this case, I've never seen a restriction on when they could open their shop, and most of the work is done interior, so it's not really
I guess I'm
disruptive.
considering noise pollution, light pollution, because it's unclear still who the tenants would be. And so depending on if they're a noisy tenant, I mean, maybe it's a question for planning if there's an ordinance regarding in the IB district
There's a noise ordinance that would cover the entire city.
for hours of operation.
Not for hours of operation, but for the noise emitted by the use.
Okay. So people could come and go 24 hours a day in an IB.
If there was a industrial use here that had 3 shifts in a
Okay.
simple space, they'd be permitted to do that, as long as the noise and the disruption met standards.
Okay. And there was something at one point about lighting. Did they submit lighting? So I know they mentioned that it would be on timers, but if we do find ourselves where they're needing to light the parking lot 24 hours a day, it's compliant with their lighting?
They will be required to comply, yes.
Just one
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Conlon.
One other thing I'd offer. The dimension of those islands are approximately 20-foot long, basically a car length, and 10-foot wide. Is that what I'm gathering here? Because if the parking spaces are 9.5 and this is 10, it's sort of like that space. I would offer this, if you could find some kind of trees that would be side by side and put 12 trees there, that would, a 10-foot tree, what do they call the fall line? I don't know what there's.
Fall line.
Drip line. Drip line, thank you. Could work out, but that would be one thing I'd offer, just to get your comment on.
Yeah, well, there are certainly groupings of trees that look better together than spread apart, and I'll use flowering crab as one of those. We have a site, a residential site, and we lined the entire entrance with flowering crab, and it's just so pretty in the springtime. And unfortunately, very few trees bloom all summer. There's some lilacs, there's some different things, but there are groupings that would certainly allow 3 trees in each of these islands, if that were,
All I'm asking is for 12, two per island, and that they would fit, not the type of, not a variety that would be impinging on your parking, areas. So I would go along with that.
sure, we would too.
Okay. Yes?
Yes, Mr. Stevenot.
So the goal is I'm hearing that the goal is compliance. Is that correct? Compliance. 3 dwarf trees in 1 parking space is not compliance. So if the direction that the planning commission ends up pursuing
Okay.
is compliance, and that we, the planning staff, are tasked with achieving compliance, they will comply with the ordinance. 3 trees, 3 dwarf trees.
2.
Well, he said 3.
No, 2 per island.
The goal is compliance. We start adding 3 trees, 4 trees. So just keep that in mind, is we're not talking about circumvention, we're talking about compliance. Just,
Yes, Mr. Hudson.
I'd like to get into the tree discussion now. Seems to me that whether you have 3 trees in there or 5 trees, in the center of this lot, whether it's either asphalt black or concrete white, you're going to have a hell of a funnel of heat being generated in this spot, trapped by the outside foliage. And then you got to consider what kind of tree. Besides a dwarf, you've got some columnar trees that are about 3 feet wide and maybe 30 feet tall, versus perhaps a maple tree with a large drip line, which is also going to diffuse the heat. So I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill, and I think if we need 11 trees, that's what the plan calls for. I don't care about the spirit of the trees. I'd like to have 11 trees in there.
Thank you. All right. I think we're all set with questions for the applicant. Thank you. I know it's not a public hearing, but can we invite the public up? If anyone's here to make a comment about this, we can invite you up for public comment. But it is not a public hearing. Yep, go ahead. All you have to do is sign in and then introduce yourself.
Is it 3 minutes?
are we going to limit the speakers
Yes, we're going
to
to
3
limit
minutes?
speakers to 3 minutes. Everyone will be limited to 3 minutes, and we'll have the lights here.
Hi, my name is Dale Murish. I've lived in Troy since 1988. I ran for city council this year, and these comments might not be applicable to this project, but if you could consider them for future planning commission stuff, that would be cool. A major reason that I ran was sustainable development. Troy has very little undeveloped land, as you know, and we want to have developments that fit in with the nearby neighbors, ideally that they're happy with. We don't want new 5-story apartment buildings overlooking backyard swimming pools, which we had recently. We don't need more 2.5-story condos either. Maybe some single-story stuff that would be not so, maybe more use for older people. We may need some zoning law changes to remedy this. The 20-acre development presented at a recent council meeting had over 140 single-family dwellings. It might meet the current zoning laws, but it cries out for changes to not put 500 people on a postage stamp. It would be nice if new housing developments left most of the backyards forested for the wildlife. I'm thinking of south of Square Lake, west of John R., also south of South Boulevard and west of Crooks. The Fox Run Senior Citizens Development in Novi left a lot of woods and wetlands for the residents to enjoy. Please keep Troy the roomy suburb it is. If we wanted Royal Oak, we would have moved there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just for those of you who are considering coming up to speak, there was a time earlier in the meeting for public comment for items not on the agenda. So right now, we're just going to do public comment for this particular item, which we're speaking on, which is the proposed Livernois Elmwood Business Park. So if anyone has anything to say about that, we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. Okay, seeing no one coming up, we'll close that, and we will turn to Planning Commissioner discussion. Yep, Mr. Fox.
Yeah, like I said, when the applicant was up here, I think this is a really good use for the spot. I like the idea, the business model. I think it's creative and it's going to be a good thing to bring into the city. I do think I'm personally leaning towards an approval with conditions. That's where I'm at, is conditions to meet some of the concerns that we've met, or we've mentioned thus far. So.
Does anyone else have any? Yep, Ms. Malala.
So, as duly noted by my fellow commissioners, there are a lot of good things going for this project, undoubtedly. But trees are essential, whether it is industrial, residential, equally alike. And I'm sure the applicant is fully aware that we here in Troy have been focusing increasingly on green spaces, and that is the residents' call as well through the survey that we collected. And when the survey was collected, it was not specific to residential spaces alone. It was for Troy, for the city of Troy. So I think they have a great application, great project. This will look good in the area that they are looking to build it. And they also have the capabilities to go back to the drawing board and rethink what they can do in terms of meeting the ordinance. 6 additional trees. It's not 1 or 2, it's 6. And our ordinance does not allow, for the lack of a better word, I'm going to go back to the word that we used before, clumping. Let's make this project as good as it is, but a better one at that. Those are my 2 cents.
Mr. Buechner.
We all live in Troy. I've been to a bunch of different places. Like there's 3 different places in Troy that I go to a lot, and parking's not an issue there. I don't know their uses, and I know they do have some retail uses, so I'm not as worried about parking. You've figured out the tree thing's big for us. It's big for our community. It's big for our citizens. I also I know it's a sidewalk to nowhere, but I still think that sidewalk should go in. That's part of our spirit as a community. Those are the 2 things for me. I think you are close, and I do think there is a need for it.
Yes, Mr. Fox.
I'll brave attempting to make a motion, if that is all right. I would like to move that. Oh, forgot to scroll to the page before I started talking. Isn't that fantastic? Don't worry, it's not like there's not a lot of pages in the packet.
I think it's page 12.
Thank you. God bless.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Before he starts reading a resolution, can we have Mr. Carlisle put that
The list of residents.
screen up there that showed the conditions that you wanted to include in any kind of resolution? Mr. Fox may want to use them or may not want to, so thank you.
Much appreciated. All right. Resolved that preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed Livernois Elmwood Business Park located on the northeast corner of Livernois and Elmwood, PIN 88-20-20-34-153-041, 0-42, and 043, Section 34, Zoned IB, Integrated Industrial and Business Zoning District, be granted subject to the following. The applicant increased Livernois sidewalk to 8 feet and add a sidewalk along Elmwood Avenue. The applicant provides 6 additional trees in the parking lot to the satisfaction of the planning department. Want to throw that caveat in on the chance that they've got to play around with unit numbers. They already provided mechanical equipment screening, provide mechanical equipment screening, incorporate sustainable design features, reduce lighting levels among the eastern and northern property lines to less than a 1-foot candle, which I believe the applicant already agreed to. Also, I want to throw in there that the sign design be coordinated with city staff to the planning department's discretion. I know Mr. Tagle mentioned that the city that's probably got something with branding that they want to stay consistent with. And that's the motion.
I want to make a suggestion to the motion. If you want to add this, Mr. Fox, the line that says increase Livernois sidewalk to 8 feet, I would say 8 feet wide.
8 feet wide.
Because otherwise it can only be 8 feet long.
8 feet wide.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And add an 8-foot wide sidewalk along.
Elmwood Ave.
5.
It's 5? Okay, 5 foot.
5-foot sidewalk along Elmwood Avenue. I will very much take that, Mr. Kren. Is that a second on my motion?
Sure.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Yep, Mr. Tagle.
I have a question for staff. Screening of equipment, transformers, are those considered equipment that needs to be screened?
Yes, Accurate equipment is required to be screened.
And the plan does not show screening around the transformers?
No, the initial plan said that they couldn't screen it due to distance separation requirements, but we think they can screen it to meet the ordinance. So yes, it is required by the ordinance.
Well, certainly there is a distance that Detroit Edison requires, but that doesn't preclude having a screen around it within the distance. So Mr. Fox, I would suggest that those on-grade transformers that are sitting out in the parking lot without any vegetation or screening be added to the motion.
Absolutely agree. I thought item 3. Do I need to call out the transformers explicitly, or does item 3 cover that?
Well, they're not mechanical equipment, so
Okay.
I don't want to, anybody to walk out of the room thinking that, well, our mechanical equipment is screened, but our electrical equipment doesn't have to be.
Then I absolutely would like to include screening for the electrical equipment as well. Per Mr.
And I'll
Tagle's
second that.
description.
I have a question about the part where we say, provide the 6 additional trees within the parking lot to the satisfaction of the planning department. Does that mean that you guys are going to follow the zoning ordinance to the T? So you're going to require non-clumping 6 additional trees on islands?
We're going to follow the letter and the spirit of the zoning ordinance. And thinking here, I think this site's really tight, and it could be, I'm thinking aloud here, it's not my job to design, but I'm thinking aloud here that a simple solution could be to lose this end unit here, which is 58 by 26, I believe, replace that with 5 parking spaces right here. There's your 5 parking spaces. Now you can fill in some parking spaces over there. They may lose a unit to comply with that condition of approval.
So if I may, Madam Chair, maybe the language should be, instead of to the satisfaction of the planning department, it should be to this, complying with the zoning
Compliance
ordinance.
of the zoning ordinance.
Yep. That's your
So-
motion. Would you like to amend it to say that?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'll second it too.
Okay. And one more question I have, and I should have brought it up earlier, but I did have a question or concern about pedestrian connectivity within the parking lot, and I didn't know if it was reviewed already by the parking or traffic consultant, but for example, the entrance out to Livernois, the sidewalks on the south side of that exit, there's a sidewalk that goes on the south of the northern buildings on the south end where people park, there's a sidewalk. It doesn't really connect them if they want to head out onto Livernois or come in and go to those. So I don't know if we need to add a strip of sidewalk, and then also do we need to mark the pavement with stripes so there's a pedestrian crosswalk somewhere for pedestrians to cross safely?
It's hard to see on this plan, Ms. Breckus. There is a sidewalk that runs here and here. The sidewalk that runs along this boundary, are you talking about a sidewalk
Correct,
here
right
and a
there.
connection?
And then a connection for people to safely cross.
This, either cross this drive aisle or come all the way out to Livernois?
Well, I suppose I meant, instead of asking them to add a sidewalk on the north, to at least stripe the street so people can safely cross to the sidewalk to head out onto Livernois.
Striping across the drive aisle?
Correct.
Okay.
And then I don't know if it requires a sidewalk to connect.
Probably would want to require a sidewalk to continue just to connect to this because there's no
Correct.
connection.
Correct. I don't know if you want to add that to your motion, or if it,
Or Kathy.
adding another sidewalk. What'd you say?
I mean, let me ask the question again. Was it reviewed for pedestrian safety?
It was reviewed by myself, it was reviewed by the engineer, OHM. I didn't bring it up, I didn't catch it, and they didn't either, so it's certainly a,
Can I get your professional opinion on it?
yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, yes.
Okay, well then I would like to add that to the motion.
And I'll
Please,
second
thank
that.
you.
Nicely done.
Ms. Zarnecki, are you clear about what our motion is?
I think I will I think I'll be fine once I re-listen to the audio. I'll be fine. Thank
Okay.
you.
And Ms. Dufresne, are you comfortable with all the additions?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I guess we are done discussing. Anyone want to say anything else? All right, let's go ahead and vote.
Mr. Hudson,
Yes.
Mr. Krant,
Yes.
Mr. Lambert,
Yes.
Ms. Malala
Yes.
Ms. Parakis,
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Bickner,
Yes.
Mr. Faison,
Yes.
Mr. Fox.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you very much. And we are going to move on to the next item for tonight, which is the City of Troy Draft Master Plan. It's a discussion on the proposed neighborhood node classifications, and I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Mr. Carlisle.
Yes, I'm hoping that this will be more of a group discussion rather than my presentation, because there were a number of the planning commissioners that participated in getting us to this point. But just to back up on progress, on February 19th of this year, the city council formally rejected, but I'd like to soften the term and say kicked back the master plan to the planning commission to discuss the specific nodes at Crooks and Wattles, as well as at Livernois and Square Lake. The resolution included this language, but I wanted to include that there was some direction explicitly from the council for the planning commission consideration. On February 19th, the planning commission met, it wasn't February 19th, it was after that. The planning commission 27th, excuse me. Planning commission master plan steering committee met to discuss the nodes at Crooks and Wattles and Livernois and Square Lake. The focus, I want to reiterate to the planning commission and the public, the focus of that meeting was only to consider or reconsider the intent language and details for those two nodes. It did not consider any other aspect of the master plan. It was only to focus on those two nodes. And the steering committee forwarded the following language to the planning commission for your consideration. So I'm going to go into each of the two nodes individually. Ms. Praxis, I don't know if you want to go through each node and then have discussion, or go through both nodes and then have discussion. So
I think it might be easier if we discuss the first one and then move on.
Okay,
You didn't discuss it.
First one is Crooks and Wattles. Obviously, we're familiar with this node. It's located at the intersection of Crooks and Wattles. This is the zoning map, so I want to be very clear that we're talking about master plan, but a way to visually represent it was show the zoning map. So the parcels outlined in red are zone neighborhood node, though the master plan doesn't go into the specific detail about parcel by parcel. The zoning map, it does go by parcel. But again, we're talking about the master plan, not the zoning ordinance. I want to make that very clear. The steering committee spent a lot of time focused on the intent statement for this district, and I'm not going to read it because it's all in the packets, and I hope the public as well as the planning commission read the red line version. So all the new language is included in red, and the strike through language obviously is struck through. But the emphasis was that additional commercial development in this node is not desirable. And rather, low-density single-family and low-density multifamily is encouraged with appropriate transition via increased setbacks, landscaping, reduced height, etc. And again, it was very clear in our discussion of the steering committee meeting that there is existing traffic as well as access concerns. And so this intent language recognizes those issues as well as including that discussion as part of future development.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm going to go into a little more detail on each one.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Please.
Second paragraph.
So there was, again, very detailed discussion on each corner of this intersection as part of the steering committee. It was the belief of the steering committee that the southeast corner, which is where the 7-Eleven is, the apartments, the office building, et cetera, is already built out. Thus, there's really no need for any further action with regards to the master plan for this particular corner. The northeast corner is owned by the cemetery and zoned neighborhood node, but currently exists as a residential use. And it was the conclusion of the steering committee that the future land use for that corner should be altered from neighborhood node to future land use of single-family residential to be consistent with the surrounding property. The southwest corner, there was extensive discussion on the natural physical constraints of it, the traffic patterns, and the need for a proper transition. And the conclusion of the steering committee was to future land uses plan from neighborhood node to low-density multifamily, which constitutes an essentially an RT designation in the zoning ordinance. And I think we spent the most time on the southwest corner, if I remember correctly, and there's a lot of discussion again, of this corner. And again, a lot of discussion on the future land use and what could fit there. There was concern and discussion over existing traffic patterns and access to this location, particularly with the sensitivity and the location of traffic at that intersection. And the conclusion of the steering committee was to future land use plan this from neighborhood node to either, and this was part of the discussion that the steering committee wanted to bring to the planning commission, was either R1B, which is which is single family residential, or again, a low density multifamily RT attached. And so, Ms. Chairman, I think the 2 points of discussion are the future land use for both the southwest corner as well as the northwest corner. That's the conclusion of that node.
Okay. And before we start discussing, I do want to just make a clarification because we did have some people send emails and questioning the node names. And while if you look at the master plan today, it does say Node I for Crooks and Waddles, it has been renamed to the new proposed master plan. It's now Node F because we did eliminate some nodes. So that's the reason that there was a little bit of a mismatch between the name of the node. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we begin. So the subcommittee was made up of myself and Mr. Krent and Mr. Lambert and Mr. Faison. And so if any of you who weren't there have any questions, or if any of us who were there want to talk more about it, now is the time. Yes, Mr. Hudson.
I know the definition of R1B, but what does a zoning ordinance define as low-density, multiple-family residential? 2-story, 3-story, ranch, duplex, triplex? I guess I'd like to know what we're talking about.
It's, the lowest density multifamily district is RT, and it's actually called one family attached residential district. It's a maximum of 2.5 story, 30 feet, so that's the same maximum height as the adjacent single family residential, and it's got a maximum unit density of about 10 units per acre. So it's our lowest density. It's typically like we say, a transitional district between single family and little medium to higher density multifamily. It typically would be in the form of a duplex product, but it could include some very small triplexes or quads. Again, provided that maximum density is only 10 units per acre and it's only 2.5 stories.
Thank you.
While we're on that subject, looking at the language, if everyone has it in front of them, where it says, the first red part where it says additional commercial development is not desirable for this corner. Then it goes on to say low-scale single-family and multiple-family residential is encouraged. Because remember, we're not rezoning at this time. We're just amending the language of the master plan. I would like to see us be a little bit more explicit and add the term low-scale in front of multiple-family as well, just so there's no confusion when it comes time to rezone that what we meant by that is the RT, which is low-scale multiple-family RT attached housing. So I would be in favor of saying low-scale single-family and low-scale multiple-family residential is encouraged.
I just have one
yeah.
clarification.
Oh, yep, go ahead, Ms. Malala-Holly.
Thank you. In the second paragraph, on the fourth line, it begins by saying, if a continuation of Stonehaven is not possible, any future development of this corner shall limit access to Crooks and Wattles. Are we essentially talking about if that particular subdivision were to expand and build more homes, then is that how the language is supposed to be understood?
The thought process behind the expansion of Stonehaven is Stonehaven has an access point off of Crooks and off of Wattles already, and it's sort of, there's a stub sort of where they teed off the road with the idea that one day it could be expanded and back up to Crooks and Wattles. So the language sort of suggests that if they're going to expand Stonehaven, that it would not add entrances onto Crooks and Wattles, but they would use the existing entrances already, unless we talked about there might be the need for an EVA, which would be an exception, of course, because that would be required.
Yeah,
Does that answer your question?
It does, but is it clear enough for?
Well, if you read the sentence above it, it says, including the expansion of the Stonehaven subdivision into the southwest corner of this node, utilizing the already existing entrances from Crooks and Wattles would be appropriate, period. If a continuation of Stonehaven is not possible, i.e. extending that road, and there's a separate new development, any future development at this corner shall limit access to Crooks and Wattles to not increase existing traffic conflicts.
Is this in the packet? Did I misreading that?
That's right there, it's right here. It's on page 51.
I'm on page 51.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I do, okay. I guess you just expanded on the sentence. Got it, correct. Thank you.
Yeah, so how, the draft that went to the Planning Commission is the black lettering. The revised language that the steering committee worked on
Is
and
in
we worked
red.
on afterwards
Yeah.
is the additional red with the strike through.
Okay, no.
So that was additional language that we worked on as a steering committee.
No, that I understood. I thought there was something else that I missed, but you were just expanding on your thoughts. Oh, thank you.
And the reason the discussion was about that reducing, not increasing any traffic conflicts, the idea is that is a very heavily traveled intersection, and we don't want to add another access point right on Crooks, right near this traffic signal to, again, compound the already issues that we have there. So that's why, at least, I would like to see it just in an expansion of the existing Stonehenge subdivision, because I don't want to see any additional cut through, curb cuts on Crooks Road or Wattles for that matter. I mean, either one would cause more issues.
Absolutely. No, totally agree.
Does anyone, yep, Mr. Lambert.
I was just going to add, I think our subcommittee meeting was, for this node, was pretty united or unanimous in almost every aspect except for the southwest corner where there was some division. Do we want it to be R1B or RT? So I think that was the only thing that I think we wanted the entire commission to give their input on, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. No, you're correct. So my vote would be R1B, as I said at our meeting.
Yes.
So I think the way the discussion went with that is if we put it to R1B, we'd basically really be encouraging the Stonehaven subdivision to continue. But what we would not be able to control is if that doesn't happen and we have 5, or I have no idea how many they could fit, but let's say 5 single-family homes with driveways into Crooks. So that would be the downside of limiting it to R1B. Yes, Mr. Fox.
I know Stonehaven built that road out as a potential access. I mean, is anyone aware of any plans for the subdivision to expand? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't necessarily know if we want, I feel like if we zone it R1B, then maybe to the point that Ms. Barakis just made, we're kind of just leaving it up to, like, we don't know who's going to build there. Like, it easily could be Stonehaven, sure, but there's potential for more complications if it's not Stonehaven that decides to expand into that area, because those homes will need access out to the road, which we're trying to avoid access directly out onto Crooks and Waddles.
Why would it do that? Why would it have access to Crooks Road?
So if it's not Stonehaven, like it's not partnered with Stonehaven, is that a private road that leads out to the, okay, that is a public road? So then a new developer would be able to build access onto there? Okay, cool. Then that clears up my question. I apologize for the confusion. Then it would be able to connect there.
So that is really a zoning conversation that we're thinking about, but what we really have to make sure that we're doing is, we're talking about the language in the master plan and how tight we want it to be and how specific, because that's going to control what we do later. Right now, we're really having a conversation about zoning. So I guess we should.
Yeah, so ultimately, this is about the master plan.
Yep.
But we're at the point now where you're talking about, and we've eliminated nodes, and we've limited portions of nodes just through this process. So, yes, it will lead to eventually zoning amendments, most likely. But the direction that I think we need in terms of the master plan is, if it's removed from the node, do you think it's more appropriate to be future land use plan as single family or as a low-density multifamily? And I think that you don't have to specifically get into what district it may be at this point, that's zoning. But future land use, you should get as specific as it should be this type of land use versus that type of land use. Does that clarify this discussion?
Yeah.
Does it say that single family in that, as we have it now, for the southwest corner?
We left it open to discussion, with the planning commission as a whole, because I think I would say there wasn't consensus about whether it should be R1B or RT.
I think the way we talked about it as well, justifying the difference between the northwest corner and the southwest corner, is that the northwest corner doesn't have an access point, it wasn't going to be a continuation, let's say, of the woodlands. Like the southwest corner makes more sense to be limited to R1B because of the potential development of Stonehaven to the corner. So I think that's what we had thought about. Yes, Mr. Fox.
So as far as the southwest corner goes, most of the time, if I'm presented with an option between zoning it single family and multifamily, I'm gonna encourage multifamily. Being able to fit more units onto the lot, it's just makes sense in terms from a walkability standpoint, in terms of access standpoint, environmental sustainability standpoint. So I'm personally in the mindset that if we're presented with that dichotomy of single family or multifamily, I would be leaning towards an RT for the low density multifamily.
Yes, Mr. Tagle.
Was there ever any discussion about making this an environmentally protected and not a developed corner, like maybe a park or something like that? I really find that Waddles and Crooks for any type of residential unit is not an ideal situation. I mean, it's getting really close to some very heavily trafficked arteries. And I'm just wondering, was that ever considered or discussed or not a great idea or and I don't know, and I don't even know what that means. I don't know if that's something that the city has to buy it and they make it a park or however that works. But I'm just wondering, was that ever a consideration?
No, we didn't discuss that, and yes, the city would have to buy it and make it into a park.
And do you see that as a positive or a negative?
I think parks are great. I think there's going to be a significant cost to do that, and I don't believe that's in the coffers right now. But
well, and part of the reason I'm saying that, not only do gentlemen that came up tonight a little while ago, but we hear constantly that, oh my gosh, we're cutting all our trees, we're losing this as far as green space. maybe this is an opportunity because this is, in my opinion, not a highly desirable, although you see homes on streets that you wonder, why would anybody ever want to have a home on a street like that? But, so again, I just bring this up as a point of discussion or consideration.
That's interesting.
Yeah, we didn't consider that. Thank you, John.
I mean, I'll be honest, I've thought about it years ago when this came up other times for other developments, essentially when it got rezoned in 2008. And I looked into it and I called around to find out more information about the wetlands and whether or not they were protected. And they were shocked that I was even calling and caring about the area because they said nobody ever does. I would love to see that happen, but I do know that it costs money from the city, and I don't know, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Yep.
Let me just throw in one other thing in there. You've
Please.
heard of private-public partnerships. That may be another avenue to think about. You know, I mean, we've got the dog park over here as an example. So I don't know if, you know, if that may be something to just throw on the table to consider.
Yeah, okay, wow. All right, let me start with Mr. Hudson.
We've already got something in motion. It's not the city of Troy, it's the Troy School Board. We got Turtle Creek off of Rochester Road. We got a grant from the government, city's behind it, school board is funding a large part of it. It could be done very easily, and it's on the horizon. One more park at a major intersection wouldn't hurt.
All right, Mr. Fox?
Okay, so I feel like we may be dancing around what we are able to do in terms of our purview as a planning commission. My understanding in terms of cities acquiring currently private land is that it's one of several avenues. There's the private-public partnerships where a private entity decides to enter into a financial partnership with a city. Absolutely, those happen a lot. There's also, you know, a private owner could decide to just sell to the city. And then the third option, which I believe for a parcel that's on, you know, a main intersection, that I'm worried the city would have to kind of reach in with, is eminent domain, which in that case, and please, the attorney, the legal counsel can cut me off if I'm wrong, I believe at that point the sale price is set by a judge based on an analysis of what that property would be worth based on the value of the land. And the judge is going to make their best educated decision at that point. They'll probably consult realtors, et cetera. And to me, a major intersection right on the corner, they're going to value that incredibly high. And the city's going to have to pay extensive amount of funds. I know Milverton Park by where I live was a similar situation where the city eminent domained a private property that was in the process, I believe, of being developed into multifamily. They eminent domained it, and I believe that was in the, gosh, like millions of dollars range. So I'm throwing that out there. It's not that I don't like parks. I think parks are fantastic. If we do end up having a development on that corner, I absolutely would push for them to have like public green space and like accessible. But I do think in terms of the city getting it, short of us having a private developer that's willing to sell it to the city for a very reasonable price or do one of those public-private partnerships, unfortunately, I think that's just kind of getting out of the realm of what we can control as a board.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I don't know that it would preclude us from putting that in the master plan as an option of something to consider. So there's that. And I do want to remind everyone that we did just approve a daycare at the hard northwest corner. So I'm not sure, Mr. Tagle, if you were envisioning the park north of that or on the southwest corner?
On the southwest.
On the southwest corner. Okay, so that could be utilized by, well, everyone. Stonehaven, people using 7-Eleven, the kids walking by, there's so many schools surrounding, so I like that idea. Yes, Ms. Malala-Holly.
Although I like Mr. Tagle's idea and we'd love to go there, I do not know how that is going to happen. But for the sake of what we have in front of us, my thoughts, northwest corner, I'm very comfortable with having a low-density multifamily RT in that area. But southwest, I would definitely maintain it as a single-family residential.
So-
Go ahead, Mr. Crum.
So in the master plan that we write, we could show multiple uses for that land, being single-family or a park.
We could,
don't
yes,
we don't have to make
absolutely.
it's just, this is the
in-
vision.
yes.
It's not the ordinance.
Yes, we could definitely add in the park in that area, as Mr. Tagle rightly points out, is a valuable piece of property, but also a very nice space for a park to not overcrowd that intersection.
Okay, so we could add that language in, and then if we're talking about limiting it to R1B as a future use, we would just be talking about the expansion of the Stonehaven subdivision into the southwest corner, utilizing the already existing entrances would be most appropriate, essentially, period.
One clarification.
Yes.
Sorry. If Stonehaven were never to expand, that area can still be built as an R1B, correct? Somebody else can build it, correct? Okay, just wanted to make sure.
There's 4 lots there. I'm assuming, I don't know exact size of it, but I'm assuming through a site condominium, you could probably get more than 4 R1B lots. You could essentially have 4, 5, 6 curb cuts to Crooks if it's developed R1B and it does not connect to Stonehaven. Parcels have to have right of access, and if they front on a public road, they have to have right of access to that road. So we can try our best to dictate interconnectivity and really push, but if there's a lot that's right here and can't connect up here, these are common, they're not going to share ownership, they're share access, you're going to get an access point on there. So we'll push, we'll certainly push through this, but realistically, this could be multiple points of access on Crooks.
Yeah, Mr. Faison.
So, Mr. Carlo, on that point, just conceptually, if it's RT, I'm assuming there would be potentially not as many curb cuts.
Less curb cuts, more units.
Correct.
Less curb cuts.
Correct.
Right, and RT, my assumption, again, I don't want to assume, but if this was to go RT, it would be more likely that these 4 lots would be put together into one development rather than, an RT here, an RT there, an RT there. So if with more property, you can do better orientation and locate the access point in a more favorable location if you've got more land to work with. But more houses.
And that was my assumption. I thought that's what we talked about. That's why I was supportive of RT on that corner. And it goes also to a point Mr. Fox raised, just generally speaking, different housing types, smaller housing types, less footprint, I think are all favorable in the appropriate locations.
So what I'm hearing is, actually, the way we have it worded right now is, what I'm hearing is, from the majority, is where we want to go, because we're basically saying, let's expand Stonehaven we would then, if that happens, we could zone it to R1B, but if, I guess when we rezone, we have to pick one. Oh, gosh.
It's got to be something.
You're kicking the can down the road if you leave it kind of nebulous.
Well, and I guess a question I have is there a point where, instead of completely applying a new R1B or an RT, where the definition of neighborhood node F is amended to limit to R1B or RT uses? Like, I guess I'm wondering, is there a world where, instead of just completely wiping out the zoning and putting in new zoning, which just shoehorns into one option, we leave it with the more general zoning that at least leaves options open to the market and to the real estate market as it goes?
Yeah, it's real technical. This is again real technical zoning. You would basically have to create a separate zoning designation just for this. This corner.
So the question I have is, if we do RT, does that preclude R1B development?
You can single family in RT.
Okay, that's what I thought we talked about. Okay, so that's why, I got confused for a second, but that is what I remember the conversation being.
So
we could-
R1B allows single family
Right, only.
detached, single family only, similar to our pattern you see of the other R1Bs around it.
Right.
RT permits both very low density, smaller scale, multifamily, or single family detached homes. That would be built probably like an R1B, but it's under RT zoning.
Right, so going back to the language that we have with my one amendment that I would like to add the word low scale in front of multiple family residential. That's actually for the other node, but we should bring it, we should just be clear that we want it to be low scale, multiple family, so that when we do think about rezoning later, we keep in mind that we would like, number one, Stonehaven to be developed into single-family residential, but if not, then we can do low-scale, multiple family.
Clarification.
And if we want to add that piece in about the park,
Yes.
I think we should keep that open.
Absolutely.
City council will be watching, they can think about it.
May I seek a clarification?
Yes, please.
A couple minutes back, I know Mr. Carlisle pointed out that in the RT zoning area, we have 10 units per acre. Did I get that correct?
Yes. I think it's 5,000 square foot per unit, which equates to about 10 units an acre.
10 units per acre, okay. So RT and R1B both can be built in the RT zoned area,
You can do single family detached in RT.
in RT.
You cannot do RT in the R1.
In the R1B, yeah.
So in other words, you can go less dense, you can't go more dense. Okay. So I think that this is just a discussion that we're having. We're not making any recommendations. So do we think that we sort of reached a consensus? Yes.
There's a question.
Who has a question? Yes, Mr. Carlisle.
So is the consensus to allow flexibility with either R1B or RT for this southwest corner? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Or park, I think was the other.
Or park, yeah. Park is
Or park.
a third option.
Is that the consensus?
I mean, I saw Mr. Tagle not shaking his head the
Well,
other.
I thought we just said if it was RT,
Then
we
we-
could do either.
Exactly.
So we wouldn't have to say R1B, because that will only allow,
We're not saying anything in the master plan document in terms of R1B and RT. We're going to use words like
Single family.
single family and low scale multiple family.
okay, I was just responding to Mr. Carlisle's consensus question.
Oh,
Well, I think what I'm hearing is we're pulling the northeast corner, the northwest corner, and the southeast corner from future land use node planning.
Correct.
And a little bit of yet to be determined for the southeast corner about future, because we have the future land use plan to do something.
Southwest.
Southwest, isn't
Southwest,
it?
I'm sorry, southwest corner.
so when you say we have to suit a future land use, it, you mean you want us to tell you that we want it to be,
Well, it's gonna be honestly, it'll be a donut in the map, because there won't have anything to it, because we'll pull this out, of the map, and then this will stay in the node, and then this would be, we're gonna have some future land use designation on it.
and we also talked about the fact that the daycare, we're going to zone it so it won't be non-conforming,
It will
right?
not be non-conforming, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Lambert?
Yeah, Mr. Carlisle, I thought didn't we say low-scale RT for both the northwest and southwest
Yeah.
corners?
Yeah.
I think that's
That's
where
what we.
Yeah,
the consensus was, so if that helps you.
yeah, the first paragraph basically outlines the whole node, I mean, the whole thing. And then then the second paragraph specifically looks at the southwest. And may I?
Yes, go ahead.
I like the wording the way it is, and I'll just read it. Due to the existing traffic patterns and limited access along both Crooks and Waddles, low intensity and scale residential, including the expansion of the Stonehaven subdivision into the southwest corner of this node, utilizing the already existing entrances from Crooks and Waddles would be appropriate. I like that. And then it says, if a continuation of Stonehaven is not possible, that's, we have to put that in there, I'd say. Any future development of this corner shall limit access to Crooks and Waddles to not increase existing traffic conflicts. I'd say that, the way it's worded is exactly what I would like to see, plus add the park.
Plus add a sentence about the possibility of a park.
Correct. And I'll let the master wordsmith figure that exactly how he wants to do it for that, as far as adding the park.
Which one are you looking at?
Either one, either.
I should have noted very early on, this is going to come back for a public hearing and clarification. So this is not the only chance that you and the public has an opportunity to comment on this. So we're just getting clarification to come back for a public hearing.
Correct. So I know that people from the public are here to comment. So what do you recommend we do? Should we bring them up for this node and then move on to the other node, or should we wait, talk about the other node, and then open it up to public comment?
I think it makes more sense we've been talking about this a lot, just continue with public comment on this node.
Okay, I agree. Okay, so if anyone is here to talk about this node, F, Crooks and Waddles, you can come up, sign in, introduce yourself, and we are limiting to 3 minutes.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. This is the first time I've been to a planning commission meeting. My name is Barb Yeagley. I live just east of the southeast corner of that new node F. And I wish I'd gotten more involved earlier because they put those apartment buildings right next to the 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven I really like. Having the apartment buildings, not so good. And so I would be in support of, if you change the southwest corner or keep it at zoned R1B, single residential. I would encourage single residential in general, even on the northwest corner. And the reason for this is because Troy is being transformed into a transient community instead of a city of families, and I would really like to encourage the stability by encouraging single-family home ownership rather than transient apartment, fly-by-nights sort of thing. And that's really all I have to say, so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak. Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.
Hi, my name is Daryl DeCoot. I'm a resident on Glencastle in the Woodland subdivision. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening and appreciate all of the conversation and openness that you've had over the years as we've discussed the topic. I greatly appreciated the walkabout that was done a couple of years ago. It was great to have the opportunity to have the Planning Commission experience the corner that is in discussion. One thing that I would like the Planning Commission to consider as they look at the master plan is the definition of low-density multifamily units, particularly the 10 units per acre. I don't know when the master plan was initially done in 2008, what the desire was, but with the way the parcels are laid out, you can have a developer accumulate adjacent units, adjacent parcels, which gives the developer the opportunity to bring 130, 150 units to a space. I'm not sure if that was the intent with transition. In my perspective, a transition would be, well, maybe you allocate the first acre to be 10 units, or something like that, so that there would be a progression and a transition. Right now, it feels like the developers want to get as much property as they can, so they can put as many units as possible, and that degrades the community, as well as it adds to the traffic concerns. So I'd like the Planning Commission to consider that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Fabrice Milauskas. I am a resident of the Marehill Acres sub, just northwest of the Crooks and Wattles node, so I'd like to comment on that. First, though, I'd like to endorse Tyler Fox as a candidate for State House rep in the 57th District. He's done a tremendous job here on the Planning Commission, I believe, advocating for higher density and more affordable and environmentally sustainable neighborhoods, and I think he'd do a great job in Lansing on that as well. The values of Tyler's are the values of YIMBY, Oakland County, yes, in my backyard, the local branch of a growing national organization that I belong to. It says that city planning policy should not be captured by the special interests of a handful of residents around each node, around the wealthy residents of the Stonehaven subdivision who may want to preserve their neighborhood the way they like it, but rather should be for the entire city and the needs of future residents as well. Your job as planning commissioners in this master plan is to plan for those needs, to act also as good stewards for our outstanding school district, which needs a steady stream of adorable young children to move in, get a great education, and power the Michigan of the future. And those young families can't afford to live in most parts of Troy right now when the old guard tries to block their path at every turn. Your job is also to ensure a strong property tax base for Troy to limit the amount of tax rate increases that are needed on residents and businesses. So I'd like to focus on the point of contention here, the southwest corner of the node. I believe it should be zoned RT, and the language in here should reflect that. Just one point that hasn't been brought up. The new Westington apartment development at the other corner behind the 7-Eleven produced $270,000 in property taxes this past year. Meanwhile, the southwest corner of the node has produced $13,000 with the existing properties there. So more density generates more property taxes, which fund our schools, fund our first responders, fund our roads and infrastructure. We should encourage more density as much as possible. And I think that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jeff Saladji. I've been a resident of Troy for over 40 years. And I also live in Maryhill Acres, and maybe we see things in a different way, because I'm afraid of what I see with regards to not only what's going on with all of the trees going down and the corner at Long Lake and Crooks. what's going to happen there next. So my thinking is that I enjoy seeing a tree. I enjoy seeing the deer in my backyard, and I live in Maryhill Acres, or the turkeys or whatever. So as far as compressing everything down, I think when you do that, you start to lose some quality of life. And I think what this gentleman over here said really impressed me with the fact that we don't need to be living on top of one another. And what I find extremely interesting, and I must have missed the fact that we're getting a daycare on the corner. Okay, I have grandkids, so that might work out fairly well for me. But I find it interesting that pre-COVID, I think we were all up here and we had the Woodlands and the Maryhill Acre group, because I thought that was kind of a floodplain back in that area. So I don't know where this is going to go and what's going to happen, but I've lived in that corner now for almost over 40 years, and all it does is get more congested and more congested and more congested. And I don't think, God bless the 7-Eleven on the corner, but I'd rather see a tree. I'd rather see some woods. And I hope that later on you guys would take it in consideration, you know, as, what was the singer saying? Put up a parking lot, you know, as she would say. So I think I don't want to turn this beautiful city into a parking lot. So I think that it should be residential. I also think, though, that what I would like to see is affordable housing. You know, my kids are struggling to find another house, and they would love to come into Troy, but they can't afford it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dwight,
You start. Yep.
Thank you. My name is Jim Musial. I live at 4160 Glencastle, Troy. I live on the northwest section of that node, and I applaud the changes that you're proposing to make to decrease the proposed density of any development that might occur at that area. I think that, like the project that you discussed earlier on Livernois, I think that was a perfect project, and it was a perfect example of how that development fit in with the neighborhood. It fits in with Bryan Construction right next door, Griffin Construction with the Knights of Columbus behind it, or on the side of it. It fits right in, and that's all we're asking for in our neighborhood, is for any development to fit within the scope of the neighborhoods that are existing there today. And with respect to parks, I like that idea. I think a park would be great on the northwest node, and I think that there's already a private park that you could actually link up with. And we'd be glad to work with you in the Woodlands to turn our park over to you to consolidate, to make one nice park for the whole city there. So thank you.
Thank you. So we're still talking about crooks and models. Okay. Yep.
Hi, I'm Sheila. I'm from the original, or the other neighborhood node, not the original, the OG. So I have a special connection to this node because I was actually hit by a car while riding my bike to work right through this intersection. So I think it's really great that you guys put in that little sentence to limit access to crooks and models, because the traffic is clearly an issue for that corner. Additionally, we have to think about, we're not just Troy, we're also a pass-through, right? People come to work at Big Beaver. That's our city. You know, we're part residential, part commercial and business related. So we have to think that people are using our city as a throughway from more northern cities that are developing to get down. So we can't just think about our city in a vacuum in terms of traffic. But you know, I don't necessarily have opinions on this corner. In terms of the density, I obviously have a very clear opinion on my corner. But just because it's a multifamily home does not necessarily mean that it creates walkability, right? You can walk from a single-family home. What creates walkability is sidewalks, safe corners, safe crosswalks, striping things, having flashing lights when people need to cross. I think that's what creates walkability. So I just wanted to clear up kind of my viewpoint on that when we were saying, multifamily homes create walkability. Maybe in a sense, but that's limited to how we actually develop our sidewalks and create safe pedestrian areas. And I will not be riding my bike in that corner again.
Thank you. Thanks.
I'm John Shawcross, 1059 Fountain, just on the northwest corner there at the node. Appreciate you guys having a look at this and think these are some really positive changes to reduce the density. I know a lot of my neighbors by Fountain and Carson, pre-COVID, when there were plans, we were highly concerned with the parking. If you have that high density, there wasn't enough parking with what the developers were proposing. And, Crooks is 45 miles an hour. If people are parking on the street on Fountain, it makes for a dangerous situation. If with these developments, it just feels like there would be a lot more cars and parking. There's a lot of young children in our neighborhood. We want to keep them safe, and I think these are some really positive changes. So appreciate what you guys are doing. Thanks.
Okay, it looks like that's everybody who's interested in discussing this node, so thank you very much. Maybe some of my fellow commissioners want to respond to some of the comments, but I just wanted to comment on one thing because it comes up from time to time, and I want to make sure everyone understands the Planning Commission does not consider tax revenue when we're considering an application, so that we know nothing about the tax revenue. That's not part of our, doesn't come under our purview at all. Okay, Mr. Fox.
Yeah, I know I've gone on record a couple of times saying this already, but I just want to take the chance to emphasize again. Renters are a fantastic part of this community. Whether or not somebody's living here for a year or 50 years, they are a fantastic contribution to the city of Troy. I've been a renter most of my life. I just only recently purchased a home. And so I just want to emphasize and put an emphasis on that. I think everyone in the city government at least would agree that renters are a fantastic part of our community. So providing more opportunities for folks to rent is a fantastic chance that we get as planning commissioners.
Thank you. Okay, so back to discussing the node, or do we feel that we reach the consensus and Mr. Carlisle has an idea of the few tweaks we want to make? So when we come back next time, I think it'll be April 9th at our next meeting, that you'll present us with something and then there'll be a hearing at that time. It'll be more, correct?
If the planning commission is comfortable with the direction you provide prior to the neighbors' input, yeah, I think it's clear, and we'll come back with language when the public hearing comes.
Okay, thank you. Then I think we'll move on to the next node.
Yep.
Okay. The next node is Square Lake in Livernois. The intent statement, again, the new language is outlined is in red. The old language is struck through. Again, there was very clear focus and discussion about respecting the historical past of this intersection. That was very clear in the last developments that we've seen there. Again, there was discussion about eliminating automotive uses and really focusing on non-automotive uses, as well as, similar to the last node, a discussion about low-density, single-family, and multifamily would be encouraged with appropriate transitions, again, via setbacks, reduced height, and landscape buffers. Where the Planning Commission spent a lot of time was particularly discussing these two parcels that are located on the northern end of the node and whether or not they're appropriate to remain in the node or get future land use to most likely some single-family designation. And I don't think there was consensus from the steering committee about what to do with those 2 lots. The last other point of discussion was removing this office building. This office use looks like it's in a single-family residential home from the node, and again, future land use to low-density multifamily RT. So those are the 2 points of discussion. I do want to note to the public and the steering committee that the Planning Commission spent a lot of time discussing the node in big picture for this particular area, and whether or not it was appropriate to stay node, if it was taken out of node, what the future land use would be. And my understanding of the discussion was it was felt that the existing zoning, now I'm getting back to zoning, of neighborhood node better protects the residents than what it would be if it were to take out of the node and go to a general business or commercial business. And the reason for that is the allowed uses in the GB and CB is potentially much more impactful. It talks about a lot about automobile uses, gas stations are permitted, vehicle car washes would be permitted under the GB zoning or CB zoning. If we keep it neighborhood node and tweak some of the uses, we'd much limit the uses that would be potentially impactful to the adjacent, to the neighborhood. So it was my understanding from the steering committee discussion was keeping this neighborhood node makes the most sense for future protection if any of these corners or areas were to develop, but tighten up the language and tighten up some of the uses in the zoning ordinance to further protect and establish the vision that we have intended. So I hope that hits the mark in terms of the Planning Commission discussion, but I'm open to any comments.
Yes, Mr. Fox.
Well, I just want to say I completely agree with the steering commission on the idea of narrowing auto-centric uses, seeing if we can just take the emphasis off of those, and it would be great to not have a car wash pop up on this corner. But I did have a quick question for city staff regarding, because I know there's been a lot of discussion about developments on this corner. Correct me if I'm wrong, hypothetically, let's say we amend the master plan today and then in a week the zoning ordinance gets changed. That would have no impact on any current developments or current applications that are in. They would remain in the status that they are at regardless of decisions that we make related to this.
So talk about the elephant in the room here a little bit. We, obviously have a proposed development in this portion of the node, including this parcel. Mm-hmm. This parcel has an approved site plan that is permitted to continue. It's been extended. So if nothing else, the applicant here could build their approved site plan. Mm-hmm. We do have an application for a PUD at this location, has not been approved. Mm-hmm. We would treat it, if the zoning ordinance would change, we would treat it under the existing zoning ordinance because it was submitted under this current ordinance, not what the future ordinance would be. I do want to note to the Planning Commission is the proposed development is outside of the node. So irregardless of what we do within the node, it really is not going to impact that development. That's being submitted under a separate zoning process under a PUD, which is an independent case-by-case review of zoning. So we are talking about the boundaries of this line from a future land use and zoning perspective, and what we do internal to this line would not affect how we review and process that proposed development.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes, Ms. Malala-Holly.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Carlisle. A neighborhood node is approximately 1,000 square feet from the intersection. 1,000 square feet radius.
Linear feet radius.
Linear feet radius from the intersection. Okay. In the information that we have in terms of the steering committee's discussion regarding this node, I have no comments regarding the 2 lots or the Noble Heating and Cooling building that currently sits. So that's so my question more is in relation to the historical map that Brent forwarded to me, and a couple spaces that have been identified as being or considered of historical significance. In the write-up here, I see that there is definitely a consideration that needs to be given to its historical past, for sure, but encouraging architecture that resembles late 1800s to early 1900s, I don't know whether the current building that those are, because this is so close to my node and this is a node that I'm very, very, very familiar with, I don't know whether those things are something that, I don't know whether, if it's not historical, how much of the preservation part of it will rest with us?
I missed a whole slide that I just completely forgot.
Okay.
And that was one of the questions is, obviously the node should recognize historical past of area, even if the visual evidence is not present today, but does the Planning Commission want to include more specific language requiring architectural requirements to get back to the historical past? You know, it ultimately would come into some sort of form of zoning, but you would put that kind of language, the prime the pump in the master plan, and I think this was the point of, again, speaking on how I took the discussion of the steering committee, that we struggled with that question. Should we be specific enough saying it should be similar to late 1800s, early 1900 architecture, or should there be a way that we recognize historical past with new development? And I don't know if the steering committee really came up with a conclusion on that. So I don't know if Ms. Praxis, I covered that kind of. Do you agree with that?
I would agree that I don't believe that we reached a consensus on that. And I think we were looking to what the rest of the Planning Commission thought, and we could have a discussion about it.
If I may?
Yes, please.
Thanks to Commissioner Krent for giving us a glimpse of that, the node in pictures. If you have seen the pictures, and this is where I am conflicting, although I love historical buildings, I'm a student of history, I love to see them, but I'm in conflict when you look at the buildings. Each of the corners have different kinds of buildings. It's how are they all meshing together? The best part of that intersection happens to be the Troy Corners strip mall. There is nothing else that actually coordinates. There is currently repurposed bank to a physical therapy building. Then you have these so-called quote-unquote historically significant two homes that are sitting so close to the street. I don't even know how that will be going forward. Although I love them, they are beautiful. And then there is, on the opposite side, you have the gas station, and then Pepe's Pizza, and then those ugly, very ugly buildings. And we all know which ones we are talking about. I'm struggling to understand how to define this node. This node is the most challenging for me. And I drove past so many of the nodes last week just to kind of get an understanding as to how this can be done. I don't know whether encouraging architecture that resembles late 1800s to early 19s is something that we can do into 2024 and beyond. I'm being very honest. And that particular intersection with the Troy attorney offices standing so tall, maybe it's not in the neighborhood node, but I'm just generally talking about the architecture types and shapes and sizes that exist there, the massing. This is a very difficult one to say yes to in terms of retaining the old structures, the old structural aesthetics. I mean, I hope I'm making it clear. I hope I'm not beating around the bush here. But this is the historical significance part of it. I'm deeply struggling with how to recognize this, and I would welcome the comments on this.
Thank you. Mr. Fox.
Yeah, I guess kind of piggybacking off of those comments, my general understanding is that if we were to define a specific era or type of architecture that we would want to see around the node, it would almost like we would just be kind of coming up with a new one, not necessarily building off of what's there, because there's many different styles of what is currently there. So getting some kind of cohesion or consistent architectural style, we kind of, I don't want to say we'd be plucking one out of thin air, but we'd have to ultimately settle on one of the many styles that exist in the corner and then try to get it to apply to the rest of. And I'm not sure if that's something that as a planning commission, we would want to pursue kind of trying to, in theory, rewrite the whole corner, hypothetically, but.
Thank you. Mr. Cron?
Right. So here's my thinking. Think of the next 100 years. What do we want Troy to be? What are we going to create Troy to be the destination place and make destination places within Troy? We've got a heritage there. It's trampled down and it hasn't been watered and nobody gave it fertilizer for a lot of years. The point is, think like Walt Disney. Don't think like, oh, we've got a strip mall, we got this building. As those buildings come down, as we see Troy constantly rebuilding itself, let's have it rebuilt to honor that historical past.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Lambert.
Just to follow up with Mr. Krent's comments, I know even though the proposed planned unit development is technically outside of the boundaries of the node, I think we were trying to respond to those residents who came and spoke to us about trying to preserve or enhance the historical nature of that corner. And I agree with Ms. Malahali. It's right now the way it looks, there's not a lot of historical evidence there except for a couple of homes, but as Mr. Krent was saying, redevelopment is going to occur at this corner eventually, and we'd like to see whatever goes in there be something that kind of recreates that historical past at that corner.
Thank you. Mr. Tagle, I'm just calling on you. I want your opinion on this. Not to put you on the spot, but.
Well, I guess if we really want to look at this corner, or this node from a historical perspective, I think it has to go beyond just the architecture. What are we going to honor as far as, what do we want to see on this corner as far as building types and uses? I'm a little bit concerned if we just start talking about the architectural styles without some very, very tight parameters. I'm not sure we can be successful. Construction today is a lot different than it was 100 years ago, and I'd hate to see something that didn't quite make it. Like, well, they really tried, but it didn't get quite across the finish line. So I'd be a little bit hesitant with the language as far as it's written right now, but I guess I'm really thinking that, look, if this is really the direction we're going to go, we have to dig a little deeper and see what this means beyond the architecture and the materials and things like that. But what do we really want to develop in this area to honor the past?
Right, and that's the question we've been trying to answer for a long time now.
Well, but I don't know that we've really done the research, have we? I mean, I don't know. Maybe we have. I mean,
Ms. Malala-Holly.
I mean, we don't have a lot of farms, but, yeah.
Okay. This is a question for the planning department. Brent, Mr. Savadant, and Mr. Carlisle. Is there any other intersection, not a neighborhood node, but any other intersection in the cities around us, or even farther away, where you have seen such challenges of keeping the old and trying to bring in the new? Have you seen anything? Have you heard anything? Is there anything that we can base our understanding of how they dealt with this issue?
You're the one with 85 clients.
Honestly, I've only seen it done well when it's an area that's a designated historic district with a set boundary, a set architectural style, consistency between buildings that are there. I'm not sure I've seen it done. I mean, you've got unique, like Frankenmuth and some unique communities where that's just, they picked that style, they went with it, and that's just what they've done. Some people think it's fake, and some people like it. But I have not seen it done well with melding existing or old historic and new without it actually being a district where new buildings have to comply legally with the requirements of that district. And you don't have a district here. You have 2 remaining homes that are old, but they don't qualify as historic under the historic preservation terms.
Yep.
So I didn't answer your question, but it's difficult to represent something that was once there that there's really no physical evidence of it anymore.
Yeah, well, that's the best answer. That's okay. I'll take it.
And I don't mean to end the conversation, but I would like to open the public comment at this time to hear what some of the residents think. Maybe they'll propose a great idea that we can incorporate. But if you are here to speak about this node, which I believe is Q. No, sorry, right, L, sorry. L, now's the time to come up. We're going to give 3 minutes. Please sign in and introduce yourself.
I am so excited to be here. Deborah Lisecki. You guys have done fantastic. All right. First of all, I want to take a moment. Please forgive that I'm reading. I just want to make sure I get it. I want to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you to our city council for bringing us here. Thank you to Brent for his astute actions, making sure we have a master plan that the city can be proud of. And finally, thank you to the subcommittee who rolled up their sleeves and took deep dive look at our corner, even to the extent of taking pictures in order to have an eyeball view as they discussed. We have substantial amount of hours invested into this process, and quite frankly, you really didn't hear about our desires until very late in the game. So I'm thankful for everyone that has agreed to take a step back. You've done a lot of hard work. You've answered a lot of our concerns, which I am deeply thankful for. Can you please help me understand a few terms, and you've already clarified, so I'm sorry, but I want to keep to my time. I'd like the term low scale defined. What is the maximum density allowed in our node, or the calculation method to how you arrived at what it would be? Also, I would ask the planning commissioners to look at the low intensity uses, which I'm excited to see that you've already ruled out automotive uses. I'd like you to consider ruling out any adult type businesses, since this is in a corner that has 1,700 children slash staff within walking distance of our corner. I now see you're opening it up to the node to allow multiple families as long it is on scale and orientation of node E. I'm thinking that's the complex at Waddles and John R. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Nice development, but seems to be a little higher density than what would give that neighborly village feel that I think you're going after. I would like you to consider duplexes and triplexes, which would add to the rural feel of the surrounding neighborhoods. I'm in favor of exploring stronger architectural requirements, uniformed. I also love how you're exploring the best possible way to recognize the history of our corner. I've been at this corner for 40 years. I wonder if you turned our node into a special area or a district, would that allow Troy to have more architectural aesthetic control? Thank you, City of Troy, for honoring and not forgetting Troy Corners. There's a lot of us here willing to do anything you need. You just need to reach out and ask. And one last thing regarding values, being a real estate broker in our area, the 3-story condos by Pepe's are hovering around $400,000. There's also a duplex ranch development that's in our area that was put up about a couple years ago, selling at the $400,000 mark back then, and they were 1,500 and under square footage. The Midtown Complex on Rochester Road, ranch and storing a halves that started off in the $450,000 range is now going at the $560,000 range, and those units are backing onto Rochester Road. So I would expect those values to continue to rise in our area. And with that, I'll thank you. And I'm just so excited what you're doing. I really appreciate it. And it's been a lot of work. But anyways, one thing I would want to say is, so there is no confusion, the people that have come here are talking about the node. When you talk about the PUD, that's another time, that's another subject, and we understand that. So we're here just trying to save our Troy Corners. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was fixing the slide, and I didn't start the
Okay, I
button for
wondered.
the last one, but I'm going to start hitting the 3-minute
Okay.
button for this one.
All right, I did wonder about
No
that.
fair.
He was under 3 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I thought she was pretty close, but I didn't take note. Okay.
I'm Sheila, you guys remember me. So this is a hugely improved definition in my opinion. I think what we can work with, and Ms. Malala, I think you hit the nail on the head, this corner is a mess of just random stuff has popped up. It was a mess 10 years ago, and it's even more of a mess now, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Krent, that we need to think about 100 years from now, what do we want it to look like? Because that's what's going to be developed today within the next 20 years. So with that in mind, let's say we don't do architectural requirements because it is too complicated. I'm no expert on that. But let's say we don't do that. I still think we need to capture the historical charm, which I think is a gathering place. So in my opinion, that means lowering the height to 2-story, 2.5-story, but not 3 stories. Increasing the setbacks from the road to give it a more open feel where people feel comfortable walking around and have visibility. Preservation or improvement or even creation of green space, because we've lost so much of it, I think would be essential. And that includes kind of landscaping on the street and potential landscape buffers between the nodes and the surrounding residential areas. I think that's really important too, because right now green space is a little patch of grass, and that doesn't have any future value to anyone. It should be something beautiful or something functional that we can use. Even having some level of requirement to improve the corner in terms of something the neighbors can use, like a picnic table or a bench or a gazebo or something, right? A fountain, I don't know, whatever it is. But having some kind of feature that adds to the quality of that corner could be helpful. I don't know if we're allowed to do that. I think I talked about increasing the setbacks, especially if it's a taller building. Ms. Malala, I think you were saying the Troy Law Center, I think that was you who said it, it's 2 stories right on the edge of the road compared to the 1-story dentist office. Totally different feel. If that was set back further off of the road, it would have a totally different feel to it. So potentially looking into something like that, but having a setback requirement I think would be very important. And I also support the flower barn being removed from the node, which is on that northern property. I think in our walk and talk, that was one of the huge points that the neighbors brought up was we did not like that in the neighborhood node. We wanted to keep, I don't know if it is R1B, I think it's currently in the node, but folks wanted to keep that one R1B, and I support that with the way the flower barn is currently looking. And I think that's it. And then and additionally, in terms of my sidewalk safety from the earlier node, if any sidewalks are being redone, that's probably more of a city thing, but widening them, making clear crosswalks to make it safe to walk between the 4 corners to truly make it a gathering place where you could park and walk to any place in that corner would be important. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Shelley Stenger. I grew up here. I'm 62, and I grew up on Hearst in Troy, and when we had farms and horses. And my mom, 88, my dad built the house there, and I've lived all over the world in high-density cities, New York, Tokyo, London, and I love being back in Troy. It's a different way of life. It's home, and I was shocked to see some of the changes here. Some of them good, some of them I'm not thrilled about, like you were talking about some of the buildings. But I had a couple questions about some of the things in the plan. I'm sorry, I'm really nervous. I never talk in front of anybody except my kids. So I would like to know about the traffic at that corner. because of the schools and everything, I'm wondering if they did a traffic study, what they found with that. Also, I would like to agree with the former speakers on the setbacks and the height of the buildings, as well as 2.5 stories, I think is good, and also setting them back off the road. But can you define how big the node could get? I know you were talking about, I think it's now 300 linear feet. How big can that get? Up to 1,000 linear feet, I believe. Do you see that happening at this corner? That's a concern. Also, there's a city park in the node. Will that stay a city park? And I think that's all I have. But thank you so much. I'm so nervous, but thank you for listening to me, and thank you for all your hard work. We really appreciate it. We're so glad that you guys care about our city, and I love this place. So please take care of it. It's a great home.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who wants to talk about this node?
Hi, I'm Ann from 6091. My house butts up to the node and can be seen on the maps that are presented. My only concerns about the node are because it's already established, the building's already there, to consider language that limits how dense or high-built that it could be. That's really my only concern, because my major concern is that it's literally 20 steps from my front door to my mailbox on Livernois Road. And if Livernois Road were to need to be widened at any point in time, I'm afraid that I would lose my house. That's my concern. Am I just one person? I am, but I have to advocate for myself. I was taking notes. Yeah, and just the idea of listening to everyone talk tonight, I realize there's the city, it's on you to balance the difference between housing, increasing affordable housing, and maintaining green space, which you've established as a value. And I think that it's important to consider that this corner has an opportunity to maintain or recreate green space in the future with a transition plan. Just a thought. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here? I don't see anyone moving. So I think we're going to close public comment at this time. Again, it's not the last time you get to speak on this. We are going to be talking about it again. I mean, I can't guarantee, but I think the goal is to have it back on the April 9th meeting with a public hearing, and then, of course, we'll make our recommendation to Troy City Council, and then you can speak again there. But thank you. I found it very helpful to hear thoughts. I will really quick just say what I heard that I thought was pretty interesting. I mean, everything was interesting, but in terms of the language that we have and what we need to talk about, a couple of takeaways that I took is, I think we can all agree, I think we all agreed to remove that parcel. I'm just trying to go through and knock it out so we can kind of move through it. But, you know, that parcel on the southwest.
Noble Heating.
Yes, so that, I think we all agree.
Yep.
So somebody brought up the importance of the flower barn being removed. Could you point that out? Is that one of those two strips?
It's,
The most northern strip.
I think is it that one?
Yes, that is the most northern strip.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could, I don't know what people think if we want to remove that. One of the things that really stood out to me, and it sort of goes along with what Mr. Tagle was saying about what we want and what feel are we going for and trying to create. And there was conversation about a gathering place and having it sort of that village feel and the walkability, which I do agree with, I think that is the goal. But what was interesting is that it contradicts the node, the neighborhood node zoning at that point where we were putting the buildings right up on the street, on the corners with with small setbacks relative. And so that's where, you know, if we keep it in the node and anything gets torn down and there's reconstruction, it's all going to be pulled into that corner. So it made me second guess that now. Mr. Fox.
Well, and this is one of those things. I don't want anyone to think that I am necessarily opposed to creating some kind of a district around Troy Corners, some kind of special attention the city wants to have, like more nuanced planning and like invest in actually like really getting in there, mapping out what we want for this intersection. My thought is when it comes to like us right here tonight, you know, even April 2nd, you know, as a planning commission, there's only so much that we can do without potentially bumping this master plan project back years. Because like hypothetically, we could do like a whole study. Like I've seen it, like Sterling Heights, they have like these whole designated district zones that are just all specifically about getting into the real nitty gritty of a specific intersection, specific area. But that takes a lot of time to develop. That takes, you know, maybe more time than we want to necessarily keep bumping the master plan out and, you know, want to think of something in the interim. That's a huge conversation that city council will be a part of. I mean, in terms of what is practical of what like we can do as a group, I think getting like super specific and nitty gritty. I like the language that's here, that was hashed out in the steering committee, because I feel like it is directive. It helps address a number of the issues that have been brought up. But it's not as like super specific, like we're gonna build this exact type of architectural style, we're gonna build this exact, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that this language that's been thrown up here is a really good way to kind of meet in the middle in terms of like the two visions where it's like, well, we leave it as it is or we get really, really into it, into the nitty gritty. I think that this language is a really good compromise.
Yep, Mr. Buechner.
I just have a couple points. I think the 3 parcels being removed, in my opinion, should happen. One thing I just want to say, big picture, is the master plan. Their recommendations is my understanding. None of this is set in stone. But my last point is I think we're heading in the right direction of the wording that was used. And I think the word I would use is historical. I think this node should have more historical going forward. We would ask the contractors would be more of that direction. And again, we can't get into tons of details about it, but we'd hope that they would stick with that. Those are my thoughts.
Ms. Malala-Holly.
2 things. 2 words that are, one phrase and 1 word that really fits well into the changes that the subcommittee worked on. Non-automotive oriented nature. Good phrase. Very apt for most neighborhood nodes, but definitely one for this. Second, the word complement. Complement is a very nice word for the area's historic past. I do not know whether the second sentence in that paragraph, which is housing and architectural design of Michigan housing built in the late 1800s, is something that I can kind of wrap my head around considering what we already have, and that's the one that I see every day, a mishmash of many things happening. So complementing the area's past, I feel encompasses everything. The history, the sentiments, the values, the journeys, the architecture, the people, the shaping of Troy, everything I think is encompassed in that. And I would definitely, I know we are going to revisit this, but I would definitely lean towards keeping it in a manner where we don't forget the history of this corner. And whatever gets done in this corner always complements and pays due respect to that past. That is how I would like to see this node. All what has happened today cannot be undone. But all we can do is ensure that in the future, that complementary element is retained.
Yes, Mr. Savedant.
So we're talking, we started to go down a path of talking about whether to eliminate a couple of parcels from the node, but I just want to remind the Planning Commission that the master plan shows the nodes as, we call them like blobs. They're just circles, the same size. They're not parcel by parcel. So I think the conversation of whether we should eliminate these two or three parcels, we can do that when we revisit the zoning district in a few months.
Yep, that's right. Just for the future land use when you talk about it.
Just wanted
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Krant.
Ms. Malala is exactly correct. It's a mishmash. It has architecture from the the early 1900s all the way to whatever that strip. Oh, well, the law office just last year or so. But it is a mishmash. That's why I wanted to form some kind of guideline. Obviously, we can't duplicate necessarily, our contractors, it'd be very difficult to duplicate Victorian-style housing because of the cost. But again, they could take some elements from that, how the door looks, how the windows shapes. There's things that they could introduce. It doesn't have to be, the whole beautiful Victorian queen-style house. But I just don't want to continue on the mishmash. You say we can't do much about it. Yeah, today we can't, but over the next 100 years, it can if we give the guidance today.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have anything? I mean, what did everybody think about, is there anything we can do about the node requirement with the setbacks? If we wanted to not have the setbacks be if we wanted to just give a little bit of more open space, if that's how we feel like we're going to get the feel we want?
Yeah. So, within your authority, buildings can be pushed 30 feet back. And that is, with landscaping and other features, that's a pretty healthy setback from the street. If you want to go away from the node direction, we'll go back to the traditional way where you've got the buildings in the back and all the parking in front. And I don't think that's necessarily the direction the Planning Commission wants to go. I think what I hear is a more softening of those buildings that front on the street. And I think we can do that through site plan review, and you're gonna take the mic from me. So let me finish my thought. Through site plan review, and then some tweaks to the zoning ordinance to encourage some additional either buffers or something along the street. So I think this can be done something through zoning, but I wouldn't throw the baby out of the bathwater and require we go away from the form-based elements of the code.
Okay, and before you go, Brent, I just wanted to say, just to ask, I know there's things in the neighborhood node zoning ordinance about public art, benches, water features, whatever, all these things that I think that would help create that feel that we can fit into the nodes. So maybe can we talk about adding some of that language in our thing, in our master plan? If people agree with that.
Who pays for it?
To just like in all the neighborhood nodes, the developers, we ask them and we encourage them to add art or features.
I think I could take a stab at writing a sentence to talk about, I'm going to wordsmith it, but softening the building facade for new development and, as in relation to the road, so, et cetera. I think I can add some language, a sentence to that to capture the point that I think you're bringing up.
Right, which is like the gathering place and the historical, and that they're using the word complement and just wordsmithing it so we get that community, that gathering space and historic feel. I think it could go a long way. Yeah, you wanted to say something?
I agree with everything Ben just said. And just to piggyback on that, one of the residents who spoke reminded us of the walk and talks we did. We did a neighborhood walk and talk with the Planning Commission. We also did, Ben and I also participated in one with City Council. And I remember a conversation I had with numerous council members standing at the multi-story residential building, and I asked some of the council members at the time, we hear a lot of criticism about this building. What is it about this building you don't like? What would you have done differently if you could go back and redo this? And the discussion that we had was, it's a little too close, so if it would have been pushed back maybe 5 or 10 feet, and if it was a half story, the massing wouldn't have been as much, and maybe if there was more brick. So it was like fine tuning, not necessarily putting a massive parking lot between the building and the street, but that, how did you say, softening the facade. So just a little bit of a tweak in pushing it back a little bit. And so I think there's agreement from, and I also heard the same comment with the Planning Commission when we walked through there. So I think a lot of people would agree with that sentiment.
Okay, great. All right, I mean, I think does anyone have anything else to say, or do we think we've pretty much hashed that out? All right, I think, Mr. Carlisle, you know what to do, and you'll bring us back something great.
Is there consensus that we want to move forward with the public hearing on a draft?
I think we're ready. I know City Council's pretty excited to get this moving, and I think we're ready. Should we vote?
Public hearing?
We need to vote. We have consensus.
Yeah, no, I think we have consensus.
I'd make that motion.
Do we need a motion?
I don't think we need any motion. I mean, we have a consensus to move forward to public hearing. Ben's going to take a stab at tweaking some of that language, and then we'll be back, and it'll be notified as a public hearing.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Thanks for everyone who came out to give their input, and there'll be another opportunity as well. Okay, so we are moving on to a presentation by our own Mr. Lambert, Planning Commissioner. He's going to give a Michigan Citizen Planner capstone presentation. Are we timing him?
No, there's,
Like it's 3 minutes? What?
there's going to be, this is a pass fail, and I'm the grader, so.
Pressure.
Is this the, what I used to advance the slide here? Okay. Which one here?
Forward, backwards, and that's a laser pointer.
Okay. I won't need the laser pointer. And I am timed, it won't be any longer than 20 minutes. First, I apologize for adding on to the length of tonight's meeting. I thought most people who were coming tonight were here for this presentation, but obviously they're not.
Me too.
This is not exactly the most exciting topic you're going to hear about. First, I'd like to thank Madam Chair, members of the commission, city staff, Mr. Carlisle, and Ms. Zarnecki for being here to listen to this presentation. Let's make sure this works here. There we go. All right. So what is the Michigan Land Division Act? It determines how many splits you can do on any particular piece of property within a 10-year time frame. Under the umbrella of the Michigan Land Division Act, you look at the size of the parent parcel and what shape it was in, and then you can determine how many splits are then available. So why is this relevant tonight, especially? Because on September 12th of 2023, last year, Senate Bill 480 was introduced, which would amend the Land Division Act to increase the maximum number of parcels that the first 10 acres of a parcel or a tract can be divided into. It would also allow a municipality to authorize the division of a parcel or a tract without being subject to the Act's limitations on the number of resulting parcels or tracts. So current state law says that under the Land Division Act, any division of land that will result in one or more of the parcels being less than 40 acres is subject to local government review. The number of allowable divisions depends on the size of the parent parcel. The parent parcel is whatever the shape and size of the parcel was as of March 31, 1997. If on that date there were two or more adjacent parcels under identical ownership, then the entire land area under common ownership is considered the parent tract. In addition, land held under land contract or land professionally surveyed and actively marketed for sale, but not recorded with the Register of Deeds as of March 31, 97, would be considered a parent parcel. So the Land Division Act prescribes a number of allowable divisions based on the size of the parent parcel. It's important to understand that there are several factors that influence the ability to divide or split land. Number one is the Michigan Land Division Act, which I just referenced. Number two, which is especially important for Troy, are local zoning ordinances. And number three are deed restrictions. So for example, conservation easements might affect whether you can divide land or not. The first thing you would do if a property owner wants to divide their property, the first step is to go either to the local community or the City of Troy's tax assessor or zoning administrator. Sometimes one or both of them can answer all the questions, but most often you have to talk to both of them. So for example, a 40 to 49.9 acre parent parcel is allowed 7 divisions. A 30 to 39.9 acre parent parcel is allowed 6 divisions. And a 20 to 29.9 acre parent parcel is allowed 5 divisions. If the parent parcel has already been divided, a landowner might wish to determine if additional divisions can be made. So the landowner would, number one, need to determine the total number of divisions allowed for the parent parcel. Number two, minus the number of divisions that have already been approved by the local government, even if it's not yet been sold. And number three, minus the number of divisions transferred to a resulting parcel. In other words, the number of divisions the original owner transferred to buyers of any already sold divisions. Yes, it gets more exciting from here. The resulting sum is the number of divisions allowed for the remainder of the parent parcel. A landowner could also explore his or her property deed or chain of title and consult with a local assessor to confirm the number of divisions that are available, if any. If divisions are available, has sufficient time passed in order to begin exercising the division rights? In other words, has 10 years passed since the original division was made? If no divisions are available because all have already been made or because no divisions were assigned from the parent parcel or insufficient time has passed, that 10 years passage, the parcel cannot be further divided unless 10 years have elapsed since the parcel was recorded with the County Register of Deeds. So you see, this is a map that giving you an idea of what the parcels would occur, how they would be divided out of a parent parcel. So after that 10-year time period, the division can be split further, referred to as a redivision. The total number of redivisions allowed within a division is based on another sliding scale related to the size of the division. The local unit of government where the parcel is located should have a detailed application form for reviewing land division requests. An application form is needed to determine the number of divisions and redivisions allowed. The form requires property and information and history so that the land division official conducting the review can ensure that the resulting divisions or redivisions will, number one, have an adequate and accurate legal description. Number two, not be narrower than 4:1 proportions. 3, meet the minimum parcel width required in the local zoning ordinance, if applicable. Number 4, meet the minimum parcel size required in the zoning ordinance, if applicable. Be accessible by a public road, private road, easement, or some other similar means. Not exceed the maximum number of divisions for the parent parcel or the number of redivisions for the division. Have adequate easements for public utilities from the parcel to existing public utility facilities, not result in landlocking a cemetery, not have any unpaid property taxes or special assessments due for the last 5 years, and again, any division can be redivided after a passage of 10 years. So in a local government jurisdiction with zoning and/or a separate local land division ordinance, proposed land divisions must also satisfy the standards of those local ordinances, which brings us here to the City of Troy. This is where it gets really interesting. We'll let Mr. Savinan have the last word after I finish on this, because he knows where I'm going. Chapter 41 of the city's ordinances, which is called subdivision control. Number 1, here in Troy, any person wishing to split a platted lot or acreage parcel shall submit to the city assessor a written application for parcel splitting and 2 copies of the proposed split. The city assessor shall review the proposed parcel split to determine its compliance with the applicable city ordinances and with the Michigan Land Division Act as amended. If the resultant split is in conformance with these conditions, our city assessor shall have the authority to authorize the requested split. Number 3, no lot or acreage parcel shall be split until all taxes have been paid. Number 4, splitting of a lot or acreage parcel or changing any tax parcel description in a 1-family or 2-family residential zoning district is prohibited unless the resultant parcels meet the requirements of Section 30.10.00 of the zoning ordinance, including frontage on a public street, minimum lot area, and setbacks for the existing buildings. In recorded subdivisions utilizing average lot size option, these requirements may be reduced to the minimum standards of Section 35.10.00 of the zoning ordinance if all the requirements of Section 35.10.00 through 35.10.04 are met. Now, this is where Mr. Savinant will have the last word after I finish, but this part of the Chapter 41 has not been updated in how many years now? You kind of sent me an email. 18 years. So these references to the sections in the zoning ordinance no longer are in those sections. So as one result of this research is Mr. Savinant has some homework to do here in the next few weeks, probably after he gets done with all the other stuff we've given him to do. In the case of applications for splits of non-residential property, the city assessor may require the submittal of a site plan conforming to the standards of the zoning ordinance, indicating the potential development of the subject property as it is presently zoned. Such plan shall indicate potential development of the parcel either as an independent parcel or in conjunction with the abutting land under the applicant's ownership in a manner conforming to the zoning ordinance requirements. Applicants for a loan split shall, here in the city of Troy, accept on waiver as for minor lot line adjustments, provide the city assessor with a certified architectural survey of the property proposed to be split, which shall show existing buildings, existing city utility lines, including sewer leads, serving said property, drainage courses, easements, and such other pertinent data as he may request, in addition to showing the proposed lot split and the dimensions of the new lots to be created thereby. Said survey shall, upon approval of the proposed lot split by the assessor, be recorded with the Oakland County Register of Deeds by the applicant. Now, in Mr. Savinant's defense, I will say, though, that he said, since 2006, I believe we have had 0 subdivision applications. Every 1-family development since then has been a site condominium because they can be approved so much faster. So he hasn't looked at the language, but he has an excuse because these lot splits have not really come to the city in the recent past. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt on that. So going back to Senate Bill 480, which brought up this whole discussion, this would amend the Land Division Act to increase the maximum number of parcels that the first 10 acres of a parcel or a tract can be divided into. It would also allow a municipality to authorize the division of a parcel or tract without being subject to the Act's limitations on the number of resulting parcels or tracts. So Senate Bill 480 seeks to lower development cost barriers for housing by removing current obligations to create a subdivision plat or condominium to further divide parcels above what the Land Division Act allows. The bill has passed the Michigan Senate and is now sitting in the House Committee on Local Government and Municipal Finance. If passed, and that's a big if, the bill would go into effect March 1 of 2025. So what are the arguments in favor of the bill? The bill represents a way in which a local government can control housing, affordability, and density. According to testimony before the Senate Committee on Local Government, Municipalities commonly use site condominiums instead of plats to achieve basically the same legal result of dividing real estate into separate residential building sites without spending as much time or money as a platting process. Reportedly, we don't know if the city of Troy agrees with this or not, but some local governments favor the site condominium approach, which we do here actually, over platting because that approach presents better control of market timing. Under the proposed bill, municipalities could grant the split of a parent parcel or tract by changing its ordinance to better align with a site condominium approach. The bill would offer a method of working within the platting system to achieve the same goal that local governments can achieve today using the site condominium system. So what are the negatives about the bill? Number one, the bill would not enact any protections against excessive splitting of a parent parcel or tract. The only protections would then come from a local ordinance, and if the local ordinance allowed for it, a developer could divide an existing parent parcel or tract into a 20-house subdivision in an area without infrastructure, water, or sewer. In other words, the bill would provide no guarantee that cheaper lots enabled by the bill would go toward making more affordable housing. If you don't have infrastructure, water, or sewer, what good does it do you? The cheaper lots enabled by the bill also could be used for expanding residential neighborhoods at housing costs that would not be considered affordable. The bill should not be enacted without protections against excessive splitting. And thank Mr. Savinant for some of these other insights into the bill. The U.S. and our area in particular is in the midst of a housing crisis. On some level, this law would reduce approval barriers by eliminating the requirement for a planning commission meeting and complete site plan application. We've seen site condominium applications for 2- and 3-unit developments. These will no longer have to go in front of the planning commission for review. It would have the effect of reducing transparency because approval would be administrative and not at a public hearing. Troy is approaching housing build-out, so there aren't many large vacant lots available, and it's a very subtle approach that doesn't seem like it would move the needle very much in terms of delivering more housing. And probably one of the unspoken things is, are there other bills in the works that kind of move this process in a direction that we don't really care for here in Troy? So with that, I wanted to, number one, let you know the information sources in addition to Mr. Savinant. The other information sources that I used for this, this presentation, number one, Michigan State University Extension Office, the Michigan Senate Fiscal Agency, and the House Fiscal Agency. And lastly, a thank you, number one, to the taxpayers for paying for my way to go to the planning conference and attend the citizen planner classes, and also to Brent and his staff for making the whole experience at the first planning commission or planning conference that I attended a very great conference. I mentioned to Jackie that when I was on city council, pretty much we took care of all the registration ourselves as council members. I don't know if it's different now or not, but the planning staff did all the great work to get me registered, and for the rest of us who went, really appreciate that. And with that, I would answer any questions you might have. Mr. Savinant might know the answers better than I will. Yes.
So what one are you in favor of the bill if it passes, or do you prefer keeping it as it is?
I prefer what we have right now. I don't know if this is really going to solve it. Maybe somebody out there thought it was a good idea, and obviously if it passed the Michigan Senate, there must be some lobbying group that really thinks it's a good idea, but it doesn't sound like it would be that good of a solution. Mr. Fox.
May I ask who introduced it? Senate Bill?
I think it was Hertel. Okay. Senator Hertel was the one who introduced it, I believe.
Thank you.
I think he represents the Lansing area. There's so many Hertels out there, I don't know where, the east side of Michigan or Lansing area where he's living now, so. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Faison.
Do you think, like, given the built environment in Troy currently, that it would have much impact on Troy if it passes?
I don't think it would, because I think probably whatever passes, if it passes out of the legislature and gets signed by the governor, I'm sure they'll give hopefully a lot of leeway to local cities and townships to be able to carve out their own rules and regulations. So You know, Troy, I think, has a pretty good system, especially with the site condominium process. That I don't think it would have a detrimental impact on us unless they didn't give us a lot of flexibility as a community. I don't know if Mr. Savinan agrees with me or not, so.
Well, I think I tend to lean towards it's a little bit overkill now. It's not really going to move the needle very much because we're approaching build-out. And now the parcels that are left are difficult sites insofar as they've got neighbors who are impacted. And when we review and approve, you know, these remaining applications without informing the neighbors, I don't think that's really fair. But I think if this would have been introduced 30 years ago, it would have made a tremendous impact because it increases, reduces time, it's more predictable, et cetera, et cetera. Can I add, so I was a young planner in 1997 when the Subdivision Control Act was amended and became the Land Division Act, and it's one of the most confusing laws. And that was, and I've seen it presented dozens of times, that was as good as I've seen.
Wow.
You took a really complicated topic and you explained it as well as anyone I've seen. So good job.
Thank you. I still don't understand it completely. That's why we hire lawyers, so they bring it up for us.
Nice job. Thank you for informing us. Nice work, Mr. Lambert. That was really impressive and very informative. All right, our next item on the agenda is public comment for items on the agenda. We've already offered a couple of opportunities to speak, so I'm thinking we're going to move right along to, unless anyone wants to come up. Nope. Okay. Planning Commission comment. We're going to start down there with Mrs. Zarnecki.
I have none.
Okay. Fox? Good. Beekner's gone. Hudson?
Nope.
Nothing for me.
Nothing more.
Malala Holly?
Nothing more.
Trent?
Oh, the next planners gathering is partnering to build transit-friendly communities. That will be on, hang on a minute, March 27th. It's another webinar. If you get those emails like I get them, you can tune in if you want to know about the ideas about regional transit.
All right, Mr. Teagle's all set. Ms. Dufresne?
I'm all set, thank you.
Mr. Carlisle?
My colleague, Ms. Cott, she did a great job helping me with the master plan update, so.
Awesome, thank you. And I just want to say really quick, thank you to City Council for allowing us this opportunity to revisit the master plan. They sent us back those 2 nodes, which I agreed with them were really important to get right. I appreciated all the residents who came out and spoke, and I appreciate the Planning Department for setting up that subcommittee meeting so quickly and for doing all the work and getting us to where we are now. And I hope that City Council's happy with what we give them in a little time. So thanks, and meeting is adjourned.
Meetings at 11.